Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Committee on Veterans and Legal Affairs. Today, we've got a quorum present, and we're assembled electronically for the purposes of inviting public comment on legislation pending before us. After we've got 3 bills this morning. After that, we've got a few work sessions. But before we get started, we'll have committee members introduce themselves, and I'll just call on your square as I see it. So Chairman Chiazzo, kick it off.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. I'm Chris Chiazzo, represent House District 28, beautiful West Scarborough.
Hey, Representative Riley.
Hi, I'm Representative Morgan Riley. I represent House District 34, which includes part of Westbrook.
Senator Hickman.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Senator Craig Hickman, representing 14, which is 11 municipalities in southern Kennebec County, including my hometown of Winthrop.
Representative Kinney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Representative Mary Ann Kinney, and I'm good with you, Senator. I'm still going to call you Representative probably too. I represent House District 99. I have 9 towns in Western Waldo County.
Representative Supika.
Good morning. I'm Laura Supika, and I represent District 126, a portion of Bangor.
Representative McCrate.
Good morning. I'm Jay McCrate, representing Harpswell, West Bath, and Northeast Brunswick in the House.
Representative Wood.
Good morning. I'm Barb Wood, and I represent House District 38, which is the western end of the peninsula in Portland.
Great. And my name's Louis Lucchini. I represent most of Hancock County in the State Senate. Today, we've got our committee analyst, Janet Stocco, with us, as well as our committee clerk, Karen Montel. Before we get started, we'll just cover a few of the electronic committee meeting ground rules. So just so everybody's aware, this meeting is currently being live streamed on the committee's YouTube channel. So this means that anyone who's a participant in the meeting via Zoom can be seen and also heard if your microphone is unmuted. So you want to be cognizant of your mute button. People on the Zoom meeting who are waiting to testify in the attendees list can't be seen or heard until they're called upon to speak with our meeting. And just as a side note, when we bring you into the meeting, it may look like you're being dropped for a second. You may lose audio for a bit, but you'll be brought into the panelists, and then you can turn on your camera and unmute yourself. Also, as usual, this committee meeting audio is being broadcast online at the legislature's website. Regarding the chat function, just a reminder that that's not to be used for any substantive matters. It's really there just for IT assistance because it's not publicly accessible. So for our bills today, we've got 3 bills for public hearing. The order that will go, we're going to begin with LD 638, which is an act to ensure the timely and transparent delivery of unofficial election results in Maine. The second bill will be LD 706, constitutional resolution to lower the voting age to 16 years of age. And finally, an act to increase the lobbyist registration fee, which is LD 670. Just as a couple of reminders to members of the public, when you're called upon to testify, please state your name, your place of residence, and the organization you represent, if any, and only remarks on the legislation before us are considered in order. And as a general reminder, we use a 3-minute time clock. So if you can tailor your remarks to 3 minutes, that would be greatly appreciated. The House Chair will be holding a clock when you're getting near the end. It's the bearer of bad news. And then we'll stop you at 3 minutes. Okay, so with that, I think that about covers the rules. So I will open the public hearing on LD 638, an act to ensure the timely and transparent delivery of unofficial election results in Maine. And we'll recognize the sponsor of the bill, Representative Will Toole. Welcome.
Well, good morning, Senator. It's good to be back with you all today. So
it's good to see you.
Looking forward to seeing you all in person at some point soon.
That's right.
Senator Lucchini, Representative Cayazzo, distinguished members of the Veterans and Legal Affairs Committee. My name is Will Toole. I represent the communities of Cutler, East Machias, Eastport, Lubec, Machias, Machiasport, Roque Bluff, Whiting, and Trescott Township. I'm here today to present LD 638, an act to ensure the timely and transparent delivery of unofficial election results in Maine. I want to begin by apologizing for the confusing title and opaque language of this bill. At its core, the bill is really simple, or maybe I should say my intent for submitting it is quite simple. This bill directs the Secretary of State to develop a web portal for the timely delivery of unofficial federal, state, and county election results. All of us here today have spent election night by the phone waiting for our towns to report on election nights. I have a good relationship with the 8 or 9 municipalities in my district and have always been able to get the clerks to call me once their votes have been counted. That's great, but not every candidate knows that they can reach out to their towns for the results. Some are tentative or nervous about doing so, and some just never even thought of doing that. And not every town remembers to get back to every candidate on their list in a timely way, especially if they have 10 or more candidates to contact and keep track of. When it's been a long, hard day at the polls. In fact, this past election, I distinctly remember a colleague of ours stating that they never knew they won their race until the following day because they had not been contacted by their clerks, and media tallies were all over the place. That brings me to my second point. Hundreds of thousands of Mainers across the state are interested in the outcomes of these legislative races, county commissioners races, sheriff's races, and so forth. What you see on the Bangor Daily News website differs from the Portland Press Herald site, or the WABI TV website, or even worse, other less reputable sources that may be floating around social media. The truth is, anyone can throw numbers out there, which only undermines the credibility of the election as a whole. And I will add here, the media is only as good as the results they receive when they receive them, which accounts for some of the difference in totals. I have no problem with the media reporting election results, nor do I believe our clerks are willfully giving out bad information to the public or intentionally excluding candidates from receiving those results. The problem I have is that we rely too heavily on a patchwork of third parties for accurate, timely election results. We put too much of a burden on Maine towns to contact candidates when we could simply develop a portal for them to upload their results to and have those results texted, emailed, or gotten to candidates directly, or the candidate could watch the results as they come in on the Secretary of State's website. Other states do this, and I know many other states do it. It's common practice. Some do it at the county level, some do it at the state level. The media picks tallies directly from the quote-unquote official elections bureau in that particular state, or from county or local government websites. I'm not suggesting we require every town to post the election results on their website. I'm suggesting that each of Maine's 490 municipalities could electronically submit their results directly to the Secretary of State on the night of the election and have that data delivered in real time, recognizing that it is not complete or final. The media could in turn publish those results instead of relying on the patchwork of site sources for their own information. A system like this could better serve our clerks instead of making dozens of phone calls and trying to keep track of who they have and haven't called. They could upload their results in one place at one time quickly. The public and candidates would have a clearer picture of the outcome, and the state would join the 21st century in elections reporting. I have no idea how much something like this would cost, but I do believe it benefits all of us as citizens people who are engaged in the political and legislative process, and even journalism, to have one authoritative source for elections results. And I believe it's something we ought to consider investing in before the 2022 elections. If that's not feasible, certainly we ought to be able to get there before 2024. If this bill is also not achievable in its current form, or the language is not to your liking, I would encourage the committee to study ways we can more effectively transmit election results, because the issue is only going to become more pressing as technology advances and citizens' expectations increase. I've heard the Secretary of State speak in favor of utilizing technology to improve our elections in the past. And to my way of thinking, something like this would be a perfect opportunity to do just that. Thank you for the opportunity to present today and for your thoughtful consideration of this legislation. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Representative Toole, for your testimony. Any questions from the committee? Representative Kinney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Toole, for presenting this bill today. You mentioned that other states are doing this. Do you have a list of some of those states, or can you help us get a list for the work session?
I can certainly help get a list. I know generally when we were all watching Georgia with bated breath a couple of months ago, Georgia had their results were done in real time. I know it's fairly standard with most states these days. Now, some do it at the county level, some do it at the state level, but generally I think it's common practice. I do know that the Secretary of State does post an Excel spreadsheet a period of time after the election, which gives you the official final result. And that's great, but I think we could do a little better. We could do more than a spreadsheet, and we could really extend the technology. I mean, Vanguard Daily has been doing this for years, and they shouldn't be a substitute for the official Secretary of State of Maine voting results. I mean,
Representative McCrate.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good to see you, Representative Toole.
Good to see you.
Thank you. Forgive me if I missed this, but are you talking about results that are unofficial, but the polls have closed?
Right. I'm talking about on election night, after the election, the polls are closed, the votes have been counted. Typically, what happens is the clerk will call you and tell you, or you'll call and ask to be put on a list before the election, and the clerk will call you and tell you what the results they have are. And I'm saying that those results that's the results that should be published. And yes, they're unofficial. They may change because of military votes and whatnot. That's to be expected. But I mean, even the Vanguard Daily and other sites like that are freely admit that their results are not the final end all be all, that they're unofficial results. So I just think this is something the state could do and should be doing.
Representative Supika.
All right, thank you very much, Representative. Just so I have it clear, are you asking to move up the time that the Secretary of State has to say this is the official results? Because I can't remember if it's 30 or 45 days. I'm sure we'll hear from other people. But with this bill, are you trying to say the official results need to be available that night?
No, not at all. I'm saying that, so when you had your election, I'm sure that you received unofficial results from somebody, whether it be your town or the party, your political party, or somebody that was monitoring. I'm saying those results the Secretary of State should be getting those out to the public and stipulating that these are unofficial results until they have been formally certified. I'm not suggesting the Secretary of State certifies them sooner. I'm not suggesting anything of that nature, but you know, the media sources, they don't even get every town posted. Some of them, they don't. they don't even get every town posted. There are towns that don't, will report to one or not to both, or it's a mishmash of sites and or information, and it really needs to be centralized. And I'm not one for centralizing stuff and making it public, but these are our elections, and the public should have confidence that the state of Maine these are the results as we have them as of that point in time.
Oh, thank you very much. I just sometimes I would heard unofficial and then I would hear official and I was getting confused. So thank you very much for clarifying that.
And I'm sorry for that. Unofficial is anything that has not been certified. And I'm sure the Secretary of State can clarify that, but I'm not, official results are things that are results that have been certified. We've gotten our little certificate and we've been told to show up in Augusta to be sworn in. So, and those are weeks down the road. I'm not suggesting we move that deadline up because you have recounts and everything like that. So.
Okay, Representative Kinney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Are towns calling in their unofficial results on election night already, or do they have an electronic method in place to submit on election night once their ballots are counted in their municipality?
I know that in many towns are sending them in, faxing them, submitting them electronically. Those that use the Bangor Daily or other sites, that's how they get them. I know in my case, when I posted my election results on social media within minutes of receiving them. And, you know, I mean, the towns are good about, they're generally good about calling candidates if the candidate thinks to ask, but sometimes things get, their priority, the clerk's priority is to get the election finished and closed out and done so in a fair and accurate way and not, I honestly don't think if there were 12 candidates on the ballot that a clerk should necessarily have to make 12 phone calls at 2:30 in the morning when they could simply email or go into a web portal at the Secretary of State and submit those results in one click, and there they would be. And that would save everybody time and ultimately money, I think.
Chairman Chiazzo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Toole, for presenting that. Would your bill encompass municipal elections as well, or just state elections?
Well, I didn't go into municipal because some towns, every town is different, or municipality is different. Some do, I know in our town, we have an annual town meeting where we elect our municipal officers from the floor. Other towns do have elections in June, others on different days. I think it would be more of a challenge to do the local races, especially if you have write-ins, and you would have to, it would be a lot messier. Whereas with the state offices, county commissioners, sheriff, the state legislature, even the federal offices, those candidates are pretty well, we know who they are, they're registered through the Secretary of State, they've signed up that way. The Secretary of State keeps that data anyway. I think it should just be for the state and county and federal, the federal races that we see, the 2 Senate and 2 congressional races.
Okay, thank you.
And I think with that, you know, I looked this past year and I was looking at the Portland Press Herald site. They had information that Bangor Daily didn't. So you were getting conflicting information. It wasn't a big deal in my race because of the margin of it, but you take a race where it's a couple hundred votes one way or the other, and one candidate looks like they're winning on one site and not on the other, and other people have other information. It just creates confusion.
Great. Any other questions for the bill sponsor? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Representative Toole, for your testimony today. Good to see you.
Thank you. You as well.
Okay, so next, see, I think we had Kate Dufour signed up. I'm not seeing her in the list at the moment. Okay, so we'll bring in Emily Cook, followed by Patty Du Bois and Will Hayward. And-
Good morning.
Good morning. Oh, we're picking up sound from somebody's room. Okay.
That is probably.
Oh, is that you? Okay, gotcha.
Yes. There's a low hum in the Nash School, so
Okay.
I apologize.
Yeah, welcome.
Welcome. Nice to see everyone. Good morning, Senator Lucchini, Representative Chiazzo, and members of the Joint Standing Committee on Veterans and Legal Affairs. I'm Emily Cook, Special Assistant to the Secretary of State, and I'm here to offer testimony neither for nor against LD 638 on behalf of Secretary of State Shenna Bellows. We'd like to start by thanking Representative Toole for introducing this legislation because we share his overall goal of ensuring that Mainers have a trusted and timely source of information.
Emily, can you hold on just a second? Like we're getting a lot of noise from somebody.
Yeah.
Are there people talking through your room or?
I think
it seems to have stopped now.
Yes.
Okay, because we
I
couldn't
think
really.
we just got a mail delivery.
Oh, gotcha. All right, great.
Would you like me to start over?
If you'd like, yeah, we couldn't pick up much of that. Sorry about that.
That's on me. Sorry. Okay. Good morning, Senator Lucchini and Representative Chiazzo and members of the Joint Standing Committee on Veterans and Legal Affairs. I'm Emily Cook, Special Assistant to the Secretary of State, and I'm here to offer testimony neither for nor against LD 638 on behalf of Secretary of State Shenna Bellows. We'd like to start by thanking Representative Toole for introducing this legislation because we share his overall goal of ensuring that Mainers have a trusted, timely source of information for election results. We agree that it is perhaps unwise that we have come to rely on non-governmental entities for the first knowledge of election night results. What if the model for election night reporting changes from a press view? That is a potential void we would be interested in filling, but only if we can do it with the highest quality and accuracy. One concern we have with the current text of the bill is the idea of the Secretary of State's office posting unofficial results. As the Secretary of State's office is currently known to be where you look for detailed, correct information, we raise this philosophical question. Should we be posting unofficial results or only official ones? One area where this raises serious concerns would be in the event of a recount. An instance where a candidate seemed to be leading in the unofficial tally, but then was not when the official count was announced, gives us great pause. More concretely, we would need to have the resources and changes in statute necessary to fulfill this idea correctly. We anticipate a few components to this. Staffing. Compiling, checking, and uploading results on election night takes a great deal of person power. We would easily need a dozen temporary staffers on election night to handle this work in addition to an explicit allocation of overtime to permanent election staff. Technology. We need to design a new website to display the data as it comes in so that it is easily readable form for the public. Currently, official results are uploaded all at once as an Excel file. Not a format that would work for this purpose, especially given the breadth of types of races that we'd be tasked in publicizing. Public education. We would need additional resources to conduct the public awareness campaign about this new resource, as well as the funding necessary for the staffing and technology needs. Municipal support. We would need to provide support to the municipalities to execute this new function. The BMV, for example, has a municipal services unit. We're mindful that this is a requirement on the municipalities who would be tasked with reporting results to the Secretary of State on election night. Processes and procedures would need to be created to execute that securely and accurately, and the language of the bill would need to be amended to ensure clarity about municipal clerk's obligation. And time. An undertaking this large could not happen overnight. We would want to consult with other states to see how they handle similar data reporting tasks and under what timeframes. Then we would want to be sure to have enough time to implement this idea correctly, to obtain the technology necessary to stand up the new website, train the temporary staff, work with municipal clerks to ensure the results would be relayed to us timely and accurately, and conduct the public education campaign so people know about and use this new resource. In addition to clerks' current duties, clerks would need to be directed under the law to contact the Secretary of State's office on election night with initial tallies. Processes and procedures would be need to be created to do that. Again, we appreciate the sponsor bringing this idea forward, and we look forward to the conversations that will follow today's hearing. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Cook. Any questions from the committee? Representative Chiazzo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Cook, I'm wondering if I don't believe there are, but if you could enlighten me, are there any requirements for clerks to report races in certain orders? And the reason I ask that is because typically Scarborough will have a whole slew of multiple municipal or local bond issues, something, and oftentimes it's those counts that hold up the reporting, because our clerk wants to report everything at once and not parse it out. So are there any requirements for the clerks to report in certain orders, state races first or anything like that, or is it left to tally everything and then present all the results as one?
Not that I'm aware of, but I can double check with Julie. If the clerks are testifying, they might know as well. I see Patty's in here. But there's no order requirement that is coming to mind right now.
Thank you.
Representative Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Cook, I'm wondering if there's, I believe I've heard in other bills that there's a new system that the Secretary of State's office is hopefully going to get funded, and in the next few years we'll be able to have a lot more information technology around elections. Is that correct?
Yes. Sort of, as you mentioned, over the next couple of years, we're working on updating to a new central voter registration system. Part of that process will be finding out what technology exists or can be created to do different things that we may not be aware of at this point, because our CVR just simply doesn't allow it.
Because there might be a way that the system, a new system, would be able to tabulate things in more real time. So it's just something to consider as you're creating an RFP for that.
Definitely. Yep.
My second question is actually to the committee or to Janet possibly. Is there a way to find out from Bangor Daily News or Portland Press Herald sort of what is their process? Because in your testimony, Emily, you said, should we be looking at the model for election night reporting changes from a press view, because that's what we rely on. And I don't know how much conversation we've had with the press, because I know in my race in Portland, where absentee ballots were so high and it was a three-way race, that the press reported out that I had won when I knew from the counts that it was not the absentee, it was only what was at the polls. And I had people, that was reported nationally. And I had friends across the country texting me on my win. And I had to post on my website, I had to post on Facebook that I had not won by any means. It was a very tight race. And I didn't know until 6 o'clock the next night whether I'd won. So I think it's really hard to post anything on election night, especially if we're going to continue with a high percentage of absentees. But I think it would be good if the committee could understand just how does the press get their information on a high level. So if that's something we could take a look at, that would be great. Thanks.
I guess we can try to email the newspapers and see how they get their information. Are you aware, Ms. Cook? I mean, it's not really controlled
somewhat.
by yeah.
Just from conversations I've heard from sort of secondhand from different reporters I know anyone who works at a newspaper more or less on election night is working, whether or not elections are really what they cover. So.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Representative Kinney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Cook, for coming, testifying today. Kind of going back to some of the questions that I asked Representative Toole earlier, wondering if the towns, how the towns are submitting their election results that are coming in as they do their tallies. How do they submit it? Is it electronically, or are they calling the Secretary of State's office? And then one thought I had, if maybe there was some kind of a temporary setup, if they are submitting electronically, is it possible to work into some software that allows those results to post to your website as they're coming in, and then maybe have an expiration as far as the posting to the website after 36 or 48 hours while your office is working on figuring out the official results, not just some thoughts popping in.
Yeah, I believe the clerks submit their results to us through the CVR, but again, Patty, having done this herself, I'm sure can describe the process in more detail. And I think any and all ideas for how this might set up, we would welcome. And as you know, if we're tasked with this, looking into what the other models are that are out there, or new ideas that people have, like you mentioned, we would welcome as part of that discussion, because there's lots of different ways we could do this. And if we did do this, we just want to do it accurately and correctly.
Thank you. I sorry, Mr. Chair, a quick follow-up just to say that, yeah, I keep seeing Ms. Du Bois is smiling and nodding. I think she's going to be able to answer a lot of the questions being asked. Yeah. Thank you.
Hopefully that means I'm answering correctly, but she'll correct me if I'm not.
Thank you, Representative Kinney, for the question. Representative Wood, did you have a follow-up? Okay, all right. Any other questions for Ms. Cook? All right, seeing none, thank you, Ms. Cook. We appreciate your testimony this morning. And next up, we will, Patty's here, so we will turn it over to her whenever you're ready. Ms. Du Bois, please.
Thank you, Representative Chiazzo. Members of the Veteran and Legal Affairs Committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Patty Du Bois. I represent the Maine Towns and City Clerks Association. We are neither for nor against LD 638. Municipal clerks across the state already share unofficial election results in various ways, depending on the voting situations within their specific municipalities. Many clerks or wardens announce the results at the polling place after tallying has been completed. Some clerks post the unofficial results at the polling place or at the municipal offices, or both. Some compile a spreadsheet and distribute and post that information at the polls and on the town's website. Many clerks email results to the newspapers, other media, and candidates who have requested that service. Our members agree that consistency would be beneficial to the public and acknowledge that leaving the process to the discretion of the clerk may not be the best practice. However, many clerks express concern over adding additional duties to the closing procedures on election night. Since clerks have until Friday after election to report official results to the Secretary of State, this allows municipal clerks to verify results with a fresh set of eyes to uncover transposition errors, miscalculations, misreading of machine tapes, and other errors that can occur at the end of a very long election day. By providing results before this verification has occurred, Maine may end up in the position of having to defend the integrity of our entire election process based on a simple data entry error. As we have all witnessed, it doesn't take much to create a perception of election fraud, even if the error is easily corrected the day after the election. The process by which results would be transmitted to the Secretary of State's office indicated and could be problematic if it requires late night data entry or the completion and submission of more forms. And in addition, there would likely need to be another process put in place, another set of forms maybe, to note any changes from the unofficial results to the official results being posted. Finally, this bill states that unofficial municipal election results would be sent to the Secretary of State. However, those results are not under the purview of the Secretary of State and are administered solely at the local level. So thank you for the opportunity, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Boyce. Any questions from the committee? Representative Kinney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I just wanted to make the comment that I think that Ms. Du Bois has answered a lot of the questions that I've had earlier, and appreciate hearing about when the clerks are sending in the information to the Secretary of State, and knowing that they have till Friday is very important. And I wanted to express my appreciation for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative Kinney. Next up, we have Mr. Hayward, and Senator Lucchini's back, so I will hand the gavel back.
Great. Sorry, should I go ahead?
All set. Yep.
Great. Thank you. Good morning, Senator Lucchini, Representative Chiazzo, members of the Joint Standing Committee on Veterans and Legal Affairs. My name is Will Hayward. I'm here today as the Advocacy Program Coordinator for the League of Women Voters of Maine, and I'm testifying neither for nor against on LD 638. The League believes that confidence in our elections is enhanced by the timely sharing of election information by election administrators. We appreciate that this bill seeks to increase the amount of election information shared through official websites, and in particular, we appreciate its intent of improving the content and utility of our state elections website. However, we also recognize that a system of unofficial result reporting may be challenging to implement with the necessary level of accuracy and may require significant resources. Currently, Mainers get their unofficial election results on election night and in the days that follow from the news media, specifically from data collection carried out by the Bangor Daily News and the Associated Press. While some towns post their election results directly online, generally there are no election results posted on the Secretary of State's election results page until the results are certified, or for ranked choice voting contests until the centralized RCV count has been completed. And these results are uploaded as Excel spreadsheets. An easy to navigate, visually appealing election results page on the Secretary of State's website, like those seen in many other states, would be a significant improvement for voters seeking trusted election information. We support efforts to make state elections websites more accessible for voters across the state. We do recognize, however, that developing a system to collect and post unofficial election results in a centralized location would be a significant undertaking with several challenges. Ideally, such a system would be automated for direct input from the towns, but any such system developed would have to be usable in municipalities from the largest cities to the smallest towns and plantations. Additionally, if unofficial results were reported by the Secretary of State, the burden of instant accuracy would increase. We expect that voters would be more forgiving of an inaccurately reported total in the news media than on a state website, even ones with results labeled unofficial. If such a system is implemented, additional election night processes may be needed to ensure accurate results are reported that night, and this surely will require additional election night resources in the elections division in the Office of the Secretary of State. The League believes that the effective use of official websites is an important element in instilling voter confidence in our elections, and in an ideal system, the state would be the primary source of official election results. As parts of efforts to modernize and improve our elections and voter information, policymakers should continue to consider ways it may be possible to implement online reporting of unofficial election results. The League will be following this bill and any other efforts to improve voter information with great interest. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hayward. Any questions from the committee at this time? Representative McCrate.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Hayward. I actually have a question for Ms. Du Bois. Is that okay?
We'll have to do that at the work session.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Or through email, yeah. Any questions for Mr. Hayward? Okay, seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Yep. Okay, I don't see Ms. Dufour in the waiting room, so we will close the public hearing on LD 638. So next up, we have LD 670. Let's see, so LD 670, and that is an act to increase the lobbyist registration fee. The introducer of this bill is the House Chairman, Chiazzo, because this is a department bill. So we'll have the House Chair present it, and then we'll have Director Wayne come in and explain the reason for their submission. So turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a very, very simple change to the bill. I'm Representative Chris Chiazzo, House District 28, representing beautiful West Scarborough. I am here to present LD 670, which is an act to increase lobbyist registration fees. Very simply, this just increases the registration fee for lobbyists from $200 to $250, and the registration fee for lobbyist associates from $100 to $125. And as the chair mentioned, this is a department bill, so I'm happy to try and answer any questions, but I am sure Director Wayne would be much better positioned to answer any questions or concerns. So.
Okay, thank you, thank you, Representative Chiazzo. Any questions? Okay, seeing none. Thank you for your testimony. So we'll turn it over to Director Wayne. So you can feel free, being a department bill, you can feel free to speak for longer than 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, welcome. Yep.
Appreciate it. Good morning, Senator Lucchini, Representative Chiazzo, and members of the committee. I'm Jonathan Wayne, the director of the State Ethics Commission. This is a department bill that would increase the registration fee that we receive when a lobbyist registers with our office. So lobbyists are required to register with the commission for each one of their clients. And under current law, at the time they register, they pay a $200 fee for each one of those clients. And after they register, the lobbyists are required to file monthly reports, which provide detailed information about their lobbying activities for that client during the previous month. So they report the compensation that they have earned or they have received, the specific bills they've lobbied on. If they were paid more or earned more than $1,000 in the month for a particular bill, they have to actually quantify the amount of compensation for that bill. If they've made any expenditures on behalf of officials, they have to report that. And so there's a lot of detail in those reports that they file each month. And I've attached to my testimony a couple of examples of the monthly reports that we receive from the lobbyists, so you get to see the level of detail that they have to report. The lobbyists file the reports using an electronic filing system that has been in use since 2013. And once each report is filed, the information gets uploaded to a public access website so the public can see exactly who is paying who to lobby the legislature on legislation, and also lobbying the executive branch or the constitutional officers. And one of our goals in this proposal to increase the registration fee is that we think our electronic filing and public access system could be much improved. We'd like to make it a lot easier for the lobbyists and their assistants to file the information, and we think it could be made a lot more effective in getting the information out to the public, and that includes the press and also policymakers like you. So just to give you an idea of the scope of this, every month we receive about 410 monthly reports from lobbyists, and there are about 230 lobbyists filing those reports, and some of them have more than one client, so it adds up to about 410 reports per month. That's in the first regular session, and then in the second regular session it goes down by about 20%. On page 2 of my testimony, I've listed some of our staff responsibilities in administering this program. They're more extensive than you might think, so they're there for your reference. So our proposal is to increase the registration fee from $200 per client to $250 per client. The $200 fee was first enacted 28 years ago in 1993, and it's still the same today. So we're suggesting a $50 increase in the amount that is paid. What we have found is that the revenue from the lobbyist registration fees has not kept pace with our personnel and administrative costs. So we just want to make sure that we have enough revenue to administer this program, and that involves both paying our staff, but also paying IT, computer and phone services, rent, other departments of the state that give us services, and those kinds of things. We estimate that increasing the fee would result in about $26,000 or $35,000 more revenue per year. The greater number would be in the first regular session, and the smaller amount would be in the second regular session. What really triggered this is that we are starting now on a competitive bidding process to develop a better e-filing and public access website, and that caused us to examine, okay, what are our expenses, and we think this is justified and a good idea, and will have benefits for the public and also even the lobbyists themselves in their ease of filing the reports. So thank you much for your consideration. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Great. Thank you, Director Wayne, and bless you, Representative Corey.
Oh, geez, I wasn't on mute for that, was I?
Thank you, Director. Any questions from the committee at this time? I guess my question, so this really is just about the increased workload and everything and trying to get the IT up and running. So these fees aren't a moneymaker. It's just to cover the costs that are necessary, right?
That's right. They go into a special account that is only used to support this particular program. And like any public or private employer, our personnel costs have gone up over time since the early 90s. We do more with IT than we ever did before, and we want to do even more. So this pays directly for the costs of administering this program, and that's it.
Great. Thank you. Any other questions for Director Wayne? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Yep. Great. So the only other person we have registered is for this bill is Bob Howe. So we'll bring him into the meeting.
Okay, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Welcome.
Thank you. This is Bob Howe, resident Brunswick, fresh from my second COVID shot this morning. I'm here on behalf of the Maine Citizens for Clean Elections. I serve as their registered lobbyist and also for the League of Women Voters of Maine, and I'm testifying in support of LD 670. For over 25 years, the Clean Elections Coalition has advocated for Maine's Clean Election Act public funding system. We were there at the start to advocate for its enactment in 1996, during the early years when participation was ramping up, when budget challenges and court decisions threatened to weaken the program, and up to today, where it is well established and continues to enjoy broad support among the candidates and the general public. The voters of Maine enacted the Clean Elections Act in 1996. The law took effect in 2000. In 2015, voters again registered their support for the program in a second ballot initiative. It's a program with considerable public support. Voters deserve to know that the funds placed into the Clean Elections Fund are in fact being used to support the program. Unfortunately, that is not entirely the case. As the responsibilities and workload of the Commission have grown, the Commission has had to find ways to pay for the cost of these responsibilities. During tight budget cycles, the Commission has used money from the Clean Election Fund to pay for other programs. Over time, the Maine Clean Elections Fund has ended up subsidizing other activities of the Commission. At times, this has led to shortfalls in the funding for the Clean Elections program. This problem has been exacerbated by the fact that over a period of several years, between 2003 and 2015, a net amount of $6.6 million was taken out of the fund after having been appropriated to the fund. Part of the subsidy, although not the bulk of it, is paying for some of the administrative but not personnel costs of administering the lobbyist registration program. Our understanding is that this subsidy is on the order of $18,000 a year. Because the lobbyist registration function ought to be paid for entirely by lobbyist fees, we support LD 670. The fee increase proposed in the bill would more than cover the cost of the subsidy, but having a modest surplus of funds in the account is a reasonable measure and would avoid the need to raise lobbyist registration fees for some period of time to come. My firm registers as lobbyists each year for typically more than a dozen clients. The current lobbyist registration fees are a very reasonable cost of doing business. They represent less than 1% of the fees paid by any one client, in some cases considerably less. If we were also to register an associate lobbyist, the cost would amount to no more than 1.5% of our fees, and I'm quite certain that these increases are an even tinier percentage of the fees paid to many of our lobbyist colleagues. I urge your unanimous support of LD 670, and thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Howe. Any questions from the committee at this time? Representative Corey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's funny when I'm kind of thinking about this whole, concept right now of sort of lobbyist registration fees. And I know it's something we currently do, but you also kind of start to wonder if maybe there should be a sliding scale here based on the types of clients you actually have. I mean, certainly some are representing huge corporations, and in other cases small non-profits. Do you know, Mr. Howe, if there's ever been any discussion surrounding whether or not the lobbyist registration fee is affordable for small nonprofits versus kind of those larger corporations and everything?
A fixed fee, of course, is going to be easier for a larger organization to pay. But in my many years hanging around the State House, I've never heard the concept of a sliding fee scale brought up before. Interesting concept. I guess I'm not prepared to espouse an opinion on it this morning.
Right. Yeah, no, I was thinking that, $50 may be a big deal, or not a big deal for some lobbyists, but $50 could be a big deal for some small organizations. So anyways, cool.
Well, say most of our clients are small nonprofits, and I think once I had a client ask if we would absorb that fee.
Yeah, and this is a fee. It's a fee per client, right? Or it's.
Well, some lobbyists may bill at separately on an invoice, or they may just build that expense into their own overall fee.
Okay.
I don't know that there's a requirement to do it one way or the other, as long as it gets paid to the state.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may, I'd like to welcome the former representative back to the VLA committee, and congratulations.
Great. Any other questions? All right, seeing none. Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Howe.
Thank you.
Okay, so that concludes the list of people who were registered to sign up for this bill. So we will close the public hearing on LD 670. So next on our list, the final public hearing of the morning, we have LD 706, which is a resolution proposing an amendment to the Constitution of Maine to lower the voting age to 16 years of age. And we'll recognize the sponsor, Representative O'Neill. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning. Senator Lucchini, Representative Chiazzo, and honorable members of the Veterans and Legal Affairs Committee. I am Maggie O'Neill. I represent House District 15, which is in Saco. Thank you for the opportunity to come before you today to present LD 706, which is a resolution that would amend the Constitution to lower the voting age to 16. First, I want to give you some background on the bill. This fall, I was fortunate to work with a group of local high school students on my campaign. And I probably learned even more from them than they did from me. They brought so much thoughtfulness, clarity, and experience to our conversations. And after a few really great months of working with them and talking with them about policy, I offered to submit any proposals that they would like to work on. So this bill is one of many that we identified as a priority. Today, you're going to meet a young person named Cole Cochran, who has led the conversation on this amendment and a number of bills this session. Cole is a sophomore at TA, which is our high school in Saco. Over the past couple months, Cole has met with young people around the state. He's conducted public conversations about the amendment and worked on kind of messaging and research. He's the one running the show on this, and he's here to testify today. Other youth leaders have been part of this work, including people involved with Maine Youth for Climate Justice and the Youth Council of the League of Women Voters. So this is really a youth-led bill. And once you hear from them today, I think you're going to understand why it's so important. So my first point this morning is that youth are already leading the way. We have a long history of young people leading political and social change in our country. Today's young people are as invested as ever. We see young leaders at the forefront of our most pressing issues, including climate change and racial and social justice. Across the country, young people are organizing, they're mobilizing community members, they're working on campaigns, and they're even founding advocacy organizations to call us to action. I've spent the past few months working with young advocates on environmental legislation. You'll meet some of them today. In between class and homework, they're researching policy, they're leading conversations with peers, and they're organizing to push us to make better decisions that will shape their world now and the world that they're going to inherit from us. As an example, this past year in my hometown of Saco, local students organized to push our city council to adopt an emergency climate declaration. They drafted the declaration, they met with municipal officials, and they testified in support. They were pushing our leaders to make better future-thinking policies because they are invested in our community and they understand that they will inherit the world that policymakers like us create. The second point is that young people are stakeholders. That's the number one reason that I'm bringing this bill to you today. Young Mainers have an important stake in the decisions that we make today to shape the future of our state. They're our future. However active and engaged in civic life they may be, Mainers under the age of 18 are not currently able to vote in elections that set the course for their future. Over the past week, a lot of folks have called and emailed me about this bill. I've heard that 16 and 17-year-olds aren't ready to make these decisions or that they don't have enough life experience. Reaching the age of 18 is a big milestone in all of our lives, but the truth is it doesn't signify some seismic shift in an individual's ability to participate in society or civic life. At the age of 16, young people are already working under our employment laws, they're paying taxes, they're driving on our roads, they're attending school. I think there's no one more in touch with our education system than students and educators who are in school every day. They also bring life experiences of their families not being able to access healthcare, making ends meet with a family business, and figuring out how to pay for college. And they worry about the environmental future that we're handing to them. Many young people are also deeply engaged in politics and advocacy, despite their many, competing priorities for their time and attention, and the fact that they can't currently vote. And they're just as able to research and reason as adult voters. Youth are stakeholders, plain and simple. We all make excuses for why we can't fully fund education, why we pollute the earth, and why we don't take care of community members who need our help. Youth really bring clarity, lived experience, and a present and future interest to those issues. No one has a bigger stake in the decisions that we make today than young people. The third point is that young people are prepared to make important decisions about the future. In my testimony, you'll find a couple studies cited. One's from Rutgers University, where their analysis of data found that by 16 years old, American adolescents manifest levels of development in each quality of citizenship that are approximately the same as those apparent in young American adults of voting age. So the study concluded the lack of relevant differences in capacities for citizenship between 16 and 17-year-olds and those legally enfranchised make current laws arbitrary. The science around brain development also supports this change. To quote a piece written by Dr. Lawrence Steinberg, studies of cold cognition have shown that the skills necessary to make informed decisions are firmly in place by 16. By that age, adolescents can gather and process information, weigh pros and cons, reason logically with facts, and take time before making a decision. The students have been working on this, have researched brain development, and they'll be able to discuss it further with you today. And last, there's a national movement around this, around youth voting. Extending the franchise to 16 and 17-year-olds may seem new and different to some of us, but there's a great deal of precedent. Internationally, countries such as Austria, Argentina, Brazil, Germany, the UK, allow those as young as 16 to participate in national or local elections. Closer to home, in many US states, 17-year-olds who will be 18 by election day are allowed to participate in primary elections. As you know, Maine's one of those states. A number of US municipalities have also extended the right to vote to young adults, including cities in Maryland and California. Research shows that these young voters are engaged and informed. For example, when the city of Tacoma Park, Maryland extended the vote to young people, the city found that after the first election that included younger voters, they had the highest voter participation rate among 16 and 17-year-olds. I cite to other studies that have found that young voters make decisions just as responsibly as other constituents. Young Mainers are just as capable as the young people in any of those places. As a Mainer, I'm proud of our strong culture of civic engagement. In many ways, we've been a longtime leader in election law, and we consistently demonstrate some of the highest voter turnout rates in the nation. We can continue this important tradition by amending our Constitution to lower the voting age to 16. Young Mainers are able to vote in an informed and responsible way right now. They have the largest stake in the future we create with our votes, and they have the desire to vote. A number of them are here today to tell you in their own words what the right to vote means to them. So thank you for the opportunity to present, and I would be happy to answer any questions you have for me.
Great. Thank you, Representative O'Neill. Any questions from the committee at this time? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
All right, thanks.
Okay, so we'll move to the public comment. Again, when you're called on, just state your name, your place of residence, and the organization you represent, if any. And we will go through the list as people have signed up in advance. So we'll start with Cole Cochran, followed by Anna Siegel, and Audrey Huffnagel. So welcome, Cole. Yep.
Good morning, Senator Lucchini, Representative Chiazzo, and the esteemed members of the Joint Committee on Veterans and Legal Affairs. I'm Cole Cochran from Saco, proud to provide testimony in support of LD 706, proposing an amendment to the Constitution of Maine to lower the voting age to 16 years. I've worked on this resolution for numerous reasons, but I believe strongly that the primary focus ought to be on civic engagement in our democratic institution. First and foremost, the youth of Maine are well-informed and passionate about issues facing our state. I worked with Maine Youth Climate Justice and the Youth Council in LD 706. I listened to their concerns and propositions. Their ideas were articulate, supported with evidence, not to mention their vigor and their drive to make this bill known to the public, creating a sense of awareness. As a campaign manager to Representative Maggie O'Neill's campaign this past election, I coordinated volunteers that not only spent countless hours creating a successful campaign, but brought ideas to the table that have innovated policymaking. Overall, judging by my personal experiences with our youth, I would consider them more than qualified to cast a vote for what they believe in. Although I am reflecting on only a portion of Maine's youth, the committee must also consider the increase in civic engagement throughout our communities. For example, the state of Maryland has 4 municipalities that have a 16-year-old voting age. On average, the 4 municipalities have voter participation rates 4 times higher in the 16 to 17-year-old category in comparison to adult voters. It is also worthy to note that the city of Tacoma Park held candidate forums specifically directed for those younger than 18 years old and experienced the best turnout for these events in their history. We also have a history of leading initiatives in policy, such as climate legislation, social justice, education reform, etc. This civic engagement ought to be represented at the polls. Before I yield the rest of my time to the chair, I would like to address a common argument in opposition to LD 706. First, opponents of the bill have mentioned that 16 to 17-year-olds are not mature nor qualified to be voting. Besides my personal experiences with youth-led politics, the committee must also consider the civic education that this group has. In terms of academics, high school students are required to take a U.S. history course, which is available to juniors and seniors, the same group that would be eligible to vote. Moreover, students generally take social studies courses that involve basic functions of government and the importance of being a part of our community. Outside of academics, there are a bountiful amount of opportunities that are available to students like to be actively involved. For instance, organizations like NYCJ and LWV have hundreds of members that are actively participating in politics. Additionally, many students are given opportunities to volunteer in campaigns, advocate for reform, and testify for bills that are deeply passionate for, like I am doing here today. On that note, I urge the committee to vote ought to pass on LD 706.
Great, thank you, Mr. Cochran. Any questions from the committee at this time? Senator Hickman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Cochran, for your testimony today on this very important consideration. Do you see that if we were to allow for 16-year-olds to vote, that high schools would become places of electioneering by people running for office? And if so, do you think that's a problem or not? Thank you.
I believe that 16, 17-year-olds, given their civic engagement, would certainly increase the enthusiasm around elections. I think that 16 and 17-year-olds can certainly increase voter participation rates as well. I don't know necessarily what you mean by electioneering for public offices. Could you clarify that for me?
Yes, thank you. Campaign events at high schools.
Campaign events. I think that high schools should be reserved only for civic education and allowing opportunities to be involved in the community. I don't think that campaign events should be permitted in public offices, because technically speaking, our education, specifically public education, is linked to our government. So I think that's a conflict of interest.
Thank you.
Any other questions at this time? Okay, seeing none, thank you, Mr. Cochran. Okay, next up we have Anna Siegel, followed by Audrey Huffnagel and Deputy Secretary of State Joanne Batista. So welcome.
Hello, my name is Anna Siegel. I live in Yarmouth. I am speaking testimony on behalf of the Coalition Maine for Climate Justice. Senator Lucchini, Representative Carrizo, and honorable members of the Joint Committee on Veterans and Legal Affairs. My name is Anna Siegel, and I proudly speak as a representative for Maine Youth for Climate Justice, a coalition of over 300 youth from across the state who are fighting for bold climate action and just transition to a livable future in Maine. At the core of our work is climate justice. We acknowledge that the climate crisis is rooted in systemic failures, such as when democracy is suppressed or undermined. We also understand that to tackle such a broad issue, such as the climate crisis, it must be dealt with comprehensively. This includes civics-oriented solutions, making LD 706 an important step forward. The lives of 16 and 17-year-olds will be shaped by the decisions that politicians make today. We are constituents, we are stakeholders, we are the future, and our voices must be heard. The expectation put upon today's young people is that we must fix the mistakes of past generations and lead Maine into a brighter world. Yet, we do not have the basic right to vote. Youth are studying hard in school to live up to that expectation, and many are already engaged in political advocacy long before they turn 18, and many of us pay taxes through state income or sales tax, and yet our electoral system still refuses to hear our voices. Expanding voting rights to young adults would unquestionably strengthen democracy in Maine. Overall, there are three core aspects of this bill that motivates our coalition's support. First, LD 706 as a constitutional amendment mandates that a statewide referendum be held in order to ratify the amendment within the Maine Constitution. Hearing from all then eligible voters on this issue is concurrent with the main message of inclusion representation. Second, LD 706 offers a simple change. It would change Section 1 of Article 2 of the Maine Constitution to read that a qualified elector is one who is of the age 16 and upwards. The alteration is not complicated, and neither are its broad-reaching benefits. Third, the timeline of this resolution is efficient and streamlined, where the legislature would vote as soon as possible and a statewide referendum would then be held the following November. A 2017 essay published in the University of Princeton Law Review observed that 18 is the current voting age largely through historical accident, and 16 makes much more sense from both legal and psychological perspectives. The decision-making processes in the brain used for voting are fully developed at the age of 16. Detailing the constitutionality of acting to lower the voting age under the 26th Amendment of the US Constitution, which sets 18 as a qualification, but in no way prohibits states from setting a lower age. The clear psychological evidence of full brain development for all purposes involved in voting, and extensive historical precedent in other countries, legal scholars at Princeton effortlessly make a case for lowering the voting age to 16. LD 706, in their words, is by no means a radical idea, but rather a very necessary one to act urgently upon to enfranchise our state's young adults and foster civic engagement amongst our youth. I'm currently at school, and well, since this is a school day, many youth were not able to attend. So I do recommend that you read through the testimony submitted from many students, written testimony who submitted in support of this bill. For the above reasons, our coalition, Maine Youth for Climate Justice, urges you to vote ought to pass on LD 706. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Sorry, my internet's unstable at the moment. Thank you, Ms. Siegel. Questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Next on the list, we have Audrey Huffnagel. Welcome.
Senator Lucchini, Representative Chiazzo, and members of the Committee on Veterans and Legal Affairs. My name is Audrey Huffnagel. I am 14 years old. I am from Damascotta, Maine, and I'm speaking in support of LD 706. In the past several years, our country has elected some leaders who have made decisions that I don't agree with. I have had to live with the consequences of these decisions, but don't get a say in who is making them. At 14, I already practiced civic engagement, like testifying for bills that I care about and keeping up with political news. Yet it is still 4 years until I will be able to vote, the most basic way of participating in a democracy. Every child and teenager in our country is affected by the decisions that our leaders make, but 16 and 17-year-olds are affected even more. Many people that age work, pay taxes, and drive. If our society trusts 16 and 17-year-olds to make good decisions in jobs, managing money, and behind the wheel, then they should trust them to make good decisions voting as well. When it comes to voting, 16 and 17-year-olds are just as likely to be responsible voters as 18-year-olds. The part of the brain that makes decisions like voting, where thought and deliberation are required, is just as developed by the age of 16 as it is at the age of 18, meaning that 16 and 17-year-olds' brains are developed enough to make responsible decisions while voting. Lowering the voting age would allow 16 and 17-year-olds to have more of a say in their government. Youth have shown that we are active citizens, pushing for climate justice and racial justice. We have raised our voices to fight for what we believe in. By giving 16 and 17-year-olds the right to vote in Maine, we would have a more official role at the table, and it would give us even more involvement in civics and government. On that note, when youth begin voting at 16, they are more likely to develop a lifelong habit of voting, which would increase voter turnout. Compared to other developed countries, America's voter turnout is generally very low. In countries and cities where the voters' age has been lowered to 16, voting turnout has been dramatically higher. This could help solve problems with voter turnout in the US. This is our future, and we as young people should have a say in it. Being able to vote would allow us to elect people who could represent our interests in government, which would give young people more power to make change and affect decision-making. We are participants in government. We are affected by the decisions that leaders make, and we want to be represented. I therefore urge you to vote ought to pass on LD 706.
Thank you, Ms. Huffnagel. Any questions from the committee? Representative Riley.
Hi, I just want to thank you all for your activism and for your civic engagement. I mean, many people say youth are apathetic towards participating in our democracy, and you all prove them wrong. And just thank you for all the work that you're doing.
Thank you, Representative Riley. Any other questions for Ms. Huffnagel? Seeing none, the committee thanks you for your testimony. Next up, we have Deputy Secretary Bautista, and that will be followed by Jess Cooper and Liliana Franz.
Good morning. Representative Chiazzo, Senator Lucchini, and members of the Joint Standing Committee on Veterans and Legal Affairs. My name is Joanne Bautista, and I am the Deputy Secretary of State Policy Advisor. I am speaking today for Secretary Bellows in support of LD 706. And just like Representative Riley, I am absolutely impressed by the young people who have come out this morning in speaking out in support of this bill and how it has impacted them. And just as Secretary Bellows has said, democracy is stronger when it represents everyone and when everyone can participate. And lowering the voting age would uphold this belief. And actually, this isn't the first time that our society has had a conversation around lowering the voting age. In 1971, after hundreds of thousands of young people and students mobilized, the 26th Amendment was ratified to lower the voting age from 21 to 18. And about 50 years later, here in Maine, we are seeing history attempting to repeat itself. In the 1960s and now, the push by youth to lower the voting age has resulted because of outdated and unjust laws and policies that have impacted young people. And despite the belief that 16 and 17-year-olds lack the ability to make informed decisions, we have already seen them get involved in politics and complex grass movements, which is the reason why we're all here today. And moreover, research conducted on survey data from Austria, a country that allows 16-year-olds to vote in nationwide elections, found, quote, no convincing evidence that the voting decisions of voters under 18 are in any way of lesser quality than that of older groups of voters. As stated in the last few years, we have seen young people get really passionate about issues and demand action on things such as climate change, gun violence, and civil rights issues. And the reason youth are getting involved is that they have been that these are issues that have been decided by adults, but have irrevocable consequences that have impacted them as well. And it is time that we allow this group of citizens to have a say or a vote in policies and legislation that affect them too. In Maine, we allow 16 and 17-year-olds to pre-register so they can cast their ballot at 18. And I just want to quickly quote a study by a Danish professor from the Copenhagen Business School who studied Danish election data and identified a trickle-up phenomenon where families had voting age youth at home. It also increased the chance that their parent or guardian would vote too. And I just want to finish by saying that when we enfranchise young voters, we are also enfranchising a whole group of other people around them as well. And so on behalf of the Secretary of State, I thank you and would be happy to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Secretary. Any questions from the committee? I guess, Secretary Batista, I would follow up with Senator Hickman's question. Any concerns from the Secretary of State's position in terms of politicizing the high schools? As a former school board member, we worked very, very hard to try and maintain that separation and make sure those zones were apolitical. And I would be curious to know if there are any concerns regarding how to maintain that apolitical nature of the schools.
Yeah, thank you for that question. If this were to be enacted, I think we would want to ensure that the school property is kept as a protected place where the focus for students would be to focus on their education and not necessarily try to be targeted by campaigns or anything like that. So I think that's probably something that we would want to ensure. We would definitely be having internal conversations, more internal conversations about that issue and question should this bill move forward.
Okay, thank you. Any other committee questions for Deputy Secretary Batista? All right, seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Senator Lucchini is back. So I will return the gavel over to him.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I've got my internet working better now. We'll move to Jess Cooper. And Jess will be followed by Liliana Franz.
Thank
So
you.
welcome.
Thank you. Good morning to the chairs and members of the Veteran and Legal Affairs Committee. My name is Jess Cooper. I live in Norway, Maine, and I'm here today testifying as a youth activist, young mother, and concerned citizen to urge you to vote ought to pass on LD 706. When I attended high school roughly 10 years ago, I was involved in everything that I could be in. I was in drama, sports, math team, music. I even attended college classes in my junior and senior years of high school. But something I was never encouraged to get involved in was civics. The first time I registered to vote was in 2016, 3 years after I graduated high school. At the time, I had little to no clear understanding of how the process worked, what primaries were, who my local reps were. I was voting blindly in any local elections, feeling like I had no support and hardly a community I could reach out to learn about things that I was voting for. I imagine what it could have been like if I'd been able to vote with the support of adults in my high school who had gone to school for social studies and civic engagement. I would have had a wealth of resources to find out about and meet my local reps, to learn early on about how our elections work, discuss it with my peers, and felt the value of my voice and impact in my community. Over the last year, I have been organizing and working with over 300 young people across the state in a youth coalition called Maine Youth for Climate Justice. And I've learned more about civic engagement from 15 to 17-year-olds than on my own or with guidance from adults. The times have shifted. Young people are ready to make an impact, and they're using the resources they have and taking it a step further to engage in participatory democracy daily. When I think about young people voting, I see their voice for what it is. A genuinely concerned citizen that has taken the time to learn about what matters that directly affects their futures. It's unfortunate that my view of adults voting and participating in these systems is tainted with the idea that many adults are voting and acting with their wallets, with dollar signs in their eyes, and not necessarily in the best interest of future or even current generations. It's time we include and uplift the youth voice into the highest conversations of our state. They are demonstrating day after day that they're ready, educating themselves, and care about Maine's future, and this would send a message to the youth that their efforts and time and energy matter. It has been shown that the more times a young person is able to vote, the higher the likelihood that they will vote in all elections afterwards. We need this resolution because it will engage and keep young people engaged in the democratic process. I plan to educate my daughter on civics from a young age and have already begun. She has come with me every time I've voted. She sits in on my meetings with the NYCJ core team and knows many of these inspiring young people by name. She watches me testify for important legislation. She knows our local senators and reps, and I will continue to fight for her right to participate in democracy until the voting age is lowered to represent all voices that are necessary to our futures. Thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions from the committee at this time? Senator Hickman. Yep.
I couldn't find the raise hand button quickly enough.
That's good.
Thank you, Ms. Cooper, for your testimony. I love being at the polls on election day when parents bring their children and the children come out and tell me who they voted for. So I was wondering if your daughter accompanies you to the polls and tells you who to vote for.
She does, and she knows she knows everybody in the town, all the local reps. She doesn't necessarily tell me who to vote for, but she knows who's there speaking up for her. So
thank you, and thank you for your testimony today.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony, Ms. Cooper. Okay, I don't see Ms. France in the waiting room any longer, so we will move to Margaret Archibald, and she'll be followed by Claire Holman. Oh. Okay, welcome, Margaret.
Thank you for having me.
Good morning, Senator Lucchini, Representative Ciazzo, and the members of the Joint Committee on Veteran and Legal Affairs. My name is Margaret Archibald from Saco, and I'm here to testify in support of LD 706. Maine's youth has been interacting with national and state issues on a glowing scale that has led to remarkable action and education. Not only have many students been working and paying taxes since as young as 14, they've also extended their independence and role to organizing and participating in efforts to seek change in their communities. As a whole, our democratic nation is looking for more voter turnout and an increase in civic participation, and Maine's 16 and 17-year-olds are ready to participate. At such an age, government and policy classes have been underway, and students have developed the values they want to support through their interactions with the world around them. With independence around the corner, civic education requires the ability to participate and engage with the information they are given through U.S. history and government classes. This age group is old enough to consciously experience and be impacted by the decisions that are voted on, and therefore also have a right to say. This amendment gives voice to those who are asking for one, and they have shown that they are ready for the responsibility through the time they are putting into researching and participating in local issues outside of their schoolwork. Additionally, there was an earlier concern regarding electioneering at schools to target the younger voting body. However, schools hold the right to regulate any campaigning or political targeting on school grounds. Additionally, target campaigning occurs across all age groups. This concern is valid, but as stated earlier in the testimony of Deputy Secretary Bautista, independent decision-making skills are as developed at age 16 as they are at 18. Interacting with this responsibility beginning at a younger age simply prepares students for similar experiences throughout their lives. I yield the rest of my time to the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Archibald, for your testimony. Any questions from committee members at this time? Seeing none? Oh, Senator Hickman. There you go.
Yes, thank you for your testimony, Ms. Archibald. I missed the beginning of it, and so I apologize. Are you currently in high school? Does your high school have mock elections that mirror the elections that are coming up?
No, I attend Thornton Academy with Cole Cochran. We have in the past had, but at very low levels. So.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Ms. Archibald, for your testimony. Okay, next up we have Clara Holman. Welcome.
Thank you very much. And thank you to members of the Veterans and Legal Affairs Committee. Very happy to be able to talk to you. My name is Claire Holman. I live in South Portland. And for more than 25 years, I've had the incredible privilege of directing Blunt Youth Radio Project. We produce a weekly call-in public affairs talk show at Portland's community radio station, WMPG. I have known hundreds of teenagers. And when I first heard the idea of the 16-year-old vote, I really thought it was absurd. I just thought, no way, that makes no sense. And now I couldn't be a stronger proponent. In fact, Liliana Front, she's a member of Blunt Youth Radio. I didn't know she was going to be on here. She probably had to go back to class. I know she's in school today. But anyway, young people, it's already been said, they drive. They work, they are actively involved in society in many ways. They're well into the age of reason at 16. Many people have talked about how we've seen, like, for example, we've seen these young people, they're incredible activists and so forth. And that proves that young people care. But, you know, caring, I'm sorry to say, is not a requirement for voting. So I don't think we have to put the standard of, are they as concerned as other people? In fact, it's just a right. So I just want to say that although I believe that the young people I've known have really made me believe that our future is in good hands. Most young people actually do care and want to be involved. But I feel in some ways that's an unfair standard because you don't have to be educated. You don't have to know the first thing about the election to show up. So to put that out there and say that's the reason they can't vote, well, when you extend that out, that includes a lot of people. So I just want to say, keep it in mind, is that really a fair standard for judgment? That said, I think young people are ready. They will vote. And extending the vote to 16-year-olds is one of the most powerful things we could do to foster civic engagement, to strengthen our democracy. that is really the core of why I think this should happen. Because 18, think about 18. 18 is a time when many young people are in transition in their lives. They're off to jobs, they're off to school, they're thinking about moving out of their parental home and having bills they never had to pay before. It's not necessarily the best time to form a new habit. But had they had the practice in voting, which there certainly would be if they'd started at 16, most people would have had a chance. Most teenagers, most 18-year-olds would have had a chance to have voted a couple of times before that. So I want to say thank you. I see that. Giving them the vote earlier would promote, strengthen our democracy, help young people to learn the civics they should learn. We need to promote stronger civics in this country to help us have better understanding of all groups involved. So please support this bill. Ought to pass.
Great, thank you. Any questions from the committee at this time? Okay. Seeing none, thank you, Ms. Holman.
Thank you.
Okay, I believe that concludes the registrants for testifying in favor. So now we'll move to the segment of testimony in opposition. We have Dan Chase, who I do not see in the room. So we'll move on to Gina Leduc Coons, and we'll bring her into the meeting. And then Gina will be followed by Will Hayward for neither for nor against.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Hi, we can hear you. We can't see you, just so you know, but we can hear you.
Okay, because my internet connection is unstable. So for me, it keeps cutting in and out. Is it?
Yep, same here. You can feel free to start
cutting in and out on your end? Okay, so I'll just start. So I thank you for giving me this opportunity to testify. My name is Gina Leduc Kuntz. I live in Freeport, Maine. I'm a mother of 6 children. 3 of them are over the age of 18, so they range from 27 down to 11. I've basically been a career mother and have interacted with many youth over time. I currently have a 16-year-old who just turned 16 a few weeks ago, and I really urge you that this bill ought not to pass. Just as I'm not going to read directly from my testimony, but I did send in my written testimony. My observation of children over the past 30 years, and especially in this age group, as most parents can testify to and consult each other and complain about, can often, although they are reaching a mature age, often act irrationally, impulsively, and their brains have not reached the developmental level where they can make consistent adult decisions. I know some people may find that comment offensive, but I think the science supports that. I understand those in favor of this bill would like to see more civic involvement and engagement. This is not the arena to bolster civic involvement and engagement. More doesn't mean better. So going for quality is better. And if you look at my written testimony, you'll notice that I referenced the passage of the 26th Amendment by Congress, which happened almost 50 years to the day, March 23rd of 1971. And the debate at that time surrounded if 18-year-olds can go off to war and fight and die for our country, shouldn't 18-year-olds be afforded the right to vote? And the question really should have been, our 18-year-olds, should we be drafting our 18-year-olds and sending them off to war? And I would say, both as a mother and as a researcher, just looking back on the information that we have at hand about what happened during the Vietnam War and how our soldiers behaved over in Vietnam, the answer is no. And you're looking at the statistics and the drug abuse and the children that were born over in Vietnam because of our soldiers, our 18-year-old soldiers did not have the reasoning ability to navigate their lives in the situation they were in a reasonable manner. And I'll read you a quote. The Vietnam War was the most televised war of its time, exposing the behavior of soldiers of duty during the war, shocking millions of Americans at home. American soldiers in Vietnam began using drugs while off duty and to help cope with their struggles during the war. The Department of Defense reported that in 1971, by that time, 51% of our soldiers had smoked marijuana, 28% had consumed heroin and cocaine, 31 had used psychedelics such as LSD.
Okay, Ms. Leduc.
Excuse me,
Kuntz,
LSD or mushrooms, in addition to
your
illicit
3
drugs.
minutes has run out. I don't know if you can see that, and we're kind of losing you. So if you can wrap up your testimony, that would be great.
No, I can't. I'm sorry.
What's that? I'm sorry. Your 3 minutes has expired, but if you can wrap up, just in summarize in.
Oh,
10
I didn't know. I
seconds, that would be
didn't. I
great.
didn't see. Okay, so summary is that the summary is that you know, our government gave 18-year-olds the right to vote, so that, you know, to compensate for them going off to war. You know, 18-year-olds, 16-year-olds do not have the capacity to make a reasonable voting decision. That's my testimony.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, Representative Kinney has a question, I think. Yep.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Gina, for testifying today. I gather you have submitted your written testimony, so we could go back and read over it, especially where there was that a little bit of skipping through your testimony. Is that correct?
Yeah, we do have her testimony on the portal, on the website.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry about the tech issues, Gina. Seeing no other questions, we'll move on to the next. In the list, we have Will Hayward. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Senator Lucchini, Representative Chiazzo, members of the Veterans and Legal Affairs Committee. My name is Will Hayward. I'm here again as the Advocacy Program Coordinator for the League of Women Voters of Maine. Our positions on issues are decided by member consensus, and because we have no position on lowering the voter age to 16, I'm testifying neither for nor against on LD 706. The League of Women Voters was born near the end of the multi-generational struggle for the expansion of voting rights to women. 100 years later, it is almost incomprehensible that full participation in our democracy was denied to women for so long. Opponents to suffrage argued on completely unscientific grounds that women were intellectually inferior to men. 50 years ago, opposition to lowering the voting age to 18 was based on unproven claims that 18-year-olds were too irresponsible and politically immature to be allowed to vote. Now there's an emerging movement, not just in the US, but worldwide, to expand the vote to 16-year-olds. As before, opponents argue that 16-year-olds as a class are too young for the responsibilities of voting. Peer research to back this up is inconclusive. A 2006 paper found that 16-year-olds were less politically mature than older voters, but this work was rebutted in a 2010 article, which argued that young adults at 16, but not before, are equally as mature in citizenship as 18-year-olds are. These resources are included in my written testimony. I would encourage you all to look at them. Real-world data on voting by 16-year-olds, which is hard to come by, should become more plentiful as more jurisdictions lower the voting age. As has been noted already, several municipalities in the US have begun to allow 16-year-olds to vote in local elections. The only countries that allow 16-year-olds to vote in national elections are Austria and Malta. Since the state's founding, Maine's voting age has been lowered twice. Under the original constitution, the voting age was 21 for every male citizen. Maine lowered its voting age to 20 in 1970 and further lowered it to 18 after the ratification of the 26th Amendment. As many have noted, Maine has expanded access to younger voters in recent years through allowing 17-year-olds to participate in some primaries, and 16 and 17-year-olds can now pre-register to vote. At least one scholar has pointed to possible unintended consequences of allowing minors to vote. It has been argued that lowering the voting age could lead to undesirable changes, such as reducing the time in which a person is entitled to the protected legal status of minors. Advocates for lowering the voting age point to the benefits of our democracy of allowing high school students to form the habit of voting and becoming civically engaged. This argument resonates with the League. Over the past several years, we have strengthened our outreach to high school students around the state by inviting them to volunteer with us, by registering eligible 17 and 18-year-olds, and by developing high school civic curriculum. It makes us happy to see the engaged, informed young people who have testified today in support of LD 706. While we neither support nor oppose this bill, we applaud them for their participation. Thank you for your time, and I'd be happy to answer any questions from the committee.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Hayward. Senator Hickman.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Hayward, thank you for your information and testimony. Do you find it, well, how do you find it that if the legislature were to pass this resolution out by a 2/3 vote, and then it goes to the people for ratification, that those that we seek to enfranchise cannot actually cast a vote on the matter at the ballot box?
That's an interesting question. I think, you know, there have been multiple, there are lots of proposals that come up around expanding access to voting, and part of the challenges of these, I think, in other states, for instance, about ballot measures to expand access to incarcerated people, for instance. And you know, one of the I don't know if I want to call it one of the challenges, one of the issues is that the people whose very right to vote is at stake don't have a say in it. So that's certainly something that'll have to be considered and evaluated as the legislature moves forward with this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Representative McCray.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Hayward. I was going to ask you about the league's involvement with civic education, which you already spoke of. Someone, a constituent reading about the bill suggested some format of a statewide, he called it a referendum, but a statewide process where 16, 17-year-olds would be participating in a voting process, not just a mock election that some schools do, but a statewide issue. Is that something that's been considered, I wonder?
That's a very good question, and I don't have an immediate answer for you, but I would be happy to follow up with that information because I really like the sound of that.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions at this time? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony, Mr. Hayward.
Thank you.
Okay, so seeing no other people who are registered to testify, we will close the public hearing on LD 706. Okay, so that concludes the public hearings for the morning. We're gonna take just a short, like five or 6 minute break just to let everybody get up and do whatever for the next few minutes until we get ready to start the work sessions on the 3 bills that we heard on Monday regarding foreign expenditures and contributions. And I think, as I mentioned earlier in the week, our goal was just to get an initial kind of breakdown on these bills so people can see more information on them, as they're all 3 different proposals with complex parts. Representative Kinney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hoping that we could have maybe about 20 minutes to caucus as a committee, well, or have a caucus. Thank you.
To take a caucus right now, did you say?
Yes, please.
Okay, sure. And just to reiterate, our intention wasn't to vote or anything today. So, but yeah, we can break till 11:10. Is that good? Representative? Is that good? Okay.
Yeah, that
so
would
we'll
be
break.
great.
Yeah, we'll break until 11:10, and then we'll come back and start the work sessions. So in the same link of work if you leave this meeting. So great. We'll see you at 11:10. Okay, it's about 11:15. We can reconvene the committee on Veterans Legal Affairs to take up work session on 3 bills. These were 3 bills that we heard on Monday. So we have LD 194, an act to prohibit contributions, expenditures, and participation by foreign government-owned entities to influence referenda. We have LD 479, an act to ban foreign campaign contributions and expenditures in Maine elections. And we have LD 641, an act to prohibit contributions, expenditures, and participation by foreign nationals to influence referenda. So Janet has sent out a bunch of committee materials to committee members. That includes her analysis, as well as a couple of appendices that just give breakdown and breakdown for each bill and background information based on what other states are doing. As we had mentioned earlier, we thought this would just be a good way to go through some of the elements of each of these bills and break down what other states did, because we had a number of information requests at the previous work session. So we wanted to get this out to people relatively quickly, and then we'll be able to move forward after. So yeah, I think if Janet's ready, we can begin with her analysis. And I think if anybody has questions on items in the analysis, we can just ask them as we move through it. And I think probably just try to keep it with the clarifying questions for now. And then once we get through everything, we can have a broader discussion. But we'll go through the analysis as written, as written by Janet, and through some of these appendices and various information requests. Oh, she is there. Okay.
Oh, I didn't realize my video was off.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if you were there. I was trying to drag it out there.
Sorry, I was not focusing on my video. I was focusing on the document.
Yeah, no problem.
I just wanted to go back through how you find this information online, because we do have a new senator on our committee. So if you go to the legislature's homepage and you click on committees, people have been with us before, heard me say you go to the best for last when you scroll down to Veterans Legal Affairs. Then you click on committee materials. And there's a whole bunch of information here. What we're going to focus on today is the top bullet point, committee materials by LD number. And all 3 of these are on the same page. So I'm just going to pick the first one numerically, which is LD 194. And then here's your electronic LD file link. I know it's complicated to get there, but that's because everything through the website and system is all sorted by public hearing date. And rather than having you memorize that, we thought we'd make you links to get there. So if you look here, the first bill that day was about veteran service officers. We're having a work session next week on that. But then you have the 3 bills before you today. I'm just going to pick 479 because it's got a ton of testimony, so you can see what the sorting is needed. If you look here and you sort by name, so just click it a couple of times till it looks right, you'll see at the top information that we've provided for the work session. And then other people's submissions, we will post it up. So for example, this was posted by a different secretary, so she did it slightly differently. In all caps here, there's something from Ken Fredette that we just got that Karen forwarded to you. Our secretary posted that up to this page for us. So I'll get to that in a second, just to show you the responses to the information requests. But as far as the bill analysis, I'll get to the actual document, but the most important part, I think, to show you what the bills do is Appendix 1, and that's available here. And I sent you an email requesting that you print it out if you could, because it may be hard to see this chart when I share screens. And I understand that, and for that I apologize. It's just the best way I could compare the bills for you.
Right, and this is all totally available to the public as well. You can follow along the same way, and you can get all these documents that we're seeing too.
Right, and they can print them out or whatever. So a lot of the discussion was that these 3 bills ban to different degrees and different extents contributions by differently defined foreign nationals or foreign government entities to affect Maine and local campaigns to different degrees. There is already a federal law that has some prohibitions, so I thought I'd start there so you know what the current law is. So under federal law, it's both in statute and then some of the details are in the regulations, so they're both hyperlinked there if you want to read them directly. But the federal law that currently is in place applies to candidate elections for federal, state, and local offices. In that law, a foreign national would include your foreign governments, foreign political parties, any individual who is neither a US citizen nor a permanent resident. And then for entities, it includes partnerships, associations, corporations, organizations, or other combinations of persons that are organized under the laws of a foreign country, or they have a principal place of business in a foreign country. So those are all of the affected foreign nationals. Under that federal law, foreign nationals, these are their prohibitions on the next page, may not make or promise to make directly or indirectly a contribution in connection with a candidate election. They also may not make directly or indirectly a contribution to a political party. Furthermore, under federal law, they can't make directly or indirectly an expenditure or independent expenditure for an electioneering communication. And this chart shows you very in brief what an electioneering communication is under federal law. It's a different definition than state law in some ways. Also under federal law, a foreign national cannot direct, dictate, control, or participate in a person's, and remember, person would include a business organization or a political action committee, for example. The foreign national can't control or participate in their decision-making process for making contributions or expenditures in connection with a candidate election or decisions concerning the administration of a political committee. This prohibition is actually not in the statute, it's in the regulations. So if you're looking for it, make sure you click on the regulation site and not the statute site. So those are the prohibitions against foreign nationals directly under that federal law. The federal law also currently has some prohibitions against US citizens or non-foreign nationals. So non-foreign nationals are not allowed to knowingly solicit, accept, or receive a prohibited contribution. So for example, a candidate would not be able to solicit a contribution from a prohibited foreign national, or they would be violating the federal law. Also, you cannot knowingly provide substantial assistance in the making, solicitation, acceptance, or receipt of a prohibited contribution, or for an expenditure or independent expenditure. I'll get to this one later. And then finally, there's a penalty under federal law. The Federal Election Commission can impose a civil fine of up to $5,000 of the amount of the contribution or expenditure, whichever is greater, on the person who's violated this statute. And those fines can be doubled if the violation was knowing and willful. So that's what current federal law is, and it is candidate elections. And then I thought it was easiest to group, these are not in numeric order. That's not because I can't do numeric order, although sometimes I wonder. It is because the subjects of the bills, 194 and 641, are much more closely related than 479, which is a quite differently drafted bill. So 194 and 641 are both bills that apply solely to referendum elections that are state or local in nature in the state of Maine. Under Senator Bennett's bill, a foreign government-owned entity is what is prohibited from influencing referendum elections in Maine. And that's defined in the bill as an entity for which a foreign government owns, controls, or has a beneficial ownership of at least 10% of the equity or voting shares of the entity. By contrast, Representative Reisman's bill would apply to individuals who are not US citizens and limit their influence on referendum elections, as well as foreign entities or a US government, organization, or business that has majority control of a foreign entity. And I think that the definition is written a little bit confusingly, but what I think they're trying to say is if you're, or that bill is trying to say is it's a foreign business, or if it's a foreign majority owned business. I think if you want to go forward with that, we probably want to consider rewriting the language a little bit to make it clear. Maybe it's clear to everyone but me, but why not add clarity if you can? As far as the prohibitions against foreign actors under these two referendum-only bills, they both provide that the foreign actor, as described in the bill, may not make directly or indirectly a contribution to influence a referendum, or make directly or indirectly an expenditure to influence a referendum. In addition, the bills have statutory language, so where in the federal law it's regulatory language, and here it would be statutory language saying that the foreign entities as defined in those bills cannot direct, dictate, control, or directly or indirectly participate in a person's decision-making process for making contributions or expenditures to influence a referendum. Moving down, both of these referendum-only bills, 194 and 641, also prohibit so non-foreign actors, so these would be maybe Maine citizens, for example, from soliciting, accepting, or receiving a prohibited contribution. That's somewhat similar to that federal prohibition, but remember that federal prohibition is just candidate elections, and these two bills are about referendum elections. The penalties for violating the provisions of either LD 194 or 641 are very similar. So they both provide that the Ethics Commission can impose a fine of up to $100,000 or twice the amount of the contribution or expenditure, whichever is greater. One difference would be that in Representative Reisman's bill, there's language also that provides that the Ethics Commission should consider several factors in setting the fine, whether the violation was intentional, whether an attempt was made to conceal the identity of a foreign national. In addition, under current law, which would apply to the fine structure created in both of these bills, the fines could be doubled if the violation occurs less than 28 days before the election, or in fact tripled if the violation were to occur within 14 days of the election. And both of these referendum-only bills, so 194 and 641, do have emergency preambles. So then the final bill, Representative Bailey's bill, applies to both candidate and referendum elections. So that is a difference. And it uses the phrase foreign national, and it defines foreign national more similarly to the federal law, but it does expand upon the federal law. So it's of everybody who would be defined as a foreign national under federal law would qualify under Representative Bailey's bill, plus some more entities. So it would include foreign governments and then explicitly and their agents. Representative Bailey's bill also includes foreign political parties and again, and their agents, that's specified. It has the same group of individuals that are neither citizens or permanent residents, and the same group of entities. So any entity that's organized under the laws of a foreign country or has a principal place of business in a foreign country, as well as the agents or separate segregated funds of those entities. So in addition, this is the biggest part where the foreign national definition differs from federal law. Under Representative Bailey's bill, foreign national also includes any firm, partnership, other entity, corporation, or association. So these are domestic entities that's at least 5% owned by a foreign owner or 20% owned by 2 or more foreign owners. For purposes of deciding whether it's 5% owned by a single foreign owner or 20% owned by 2 foreign owners, you would look at the definition of foreign owner in the bill, which is an entity that's at least 50% owned by a foreign national, except if somebody owns it in widely held diversified funds. So for example, if you have a money market, I think that would qualify as a widely held diversified fund. Maybe you wouldn't realize all of the tiny little investments that are made in different companies. You wouldn't be adding those up to decide whether this threshold is met to make you a foreign owner, and thereby consider whether there's enough foreign owner interest in the entity for it to be prohibited. There's also 2 provisions about to qualify something as a foreign national if it's tax exempt under this particular provision of federal law and has at least 20% of its income from foreign nationals, or similar to the federal law prohibition against decision makings, it does say here to define a foreign national would include a business where a foreign owner or entity under one of these 2, so one of these foreign owners or an entity that would qualify here as a foreign national because it has enough foreign ownership. If one of those foreign owners or entities participates in the decisions about electioneering, then it would be considered a prohibited foreign national under the bill. So that's a lot to digest through, but you have to just trace through all of the definitions to get there, and we can talk about it if you have some questions. Do you want me to stop now and take those questions, Senator?
Sure. Are you done with this part of your analysis?
I didn't get to what the bill does specifically for the foreign actors, so I can do that, or take the questions about the details of foreign ownership. Either one.
Okay. We can start taking some questions and see where it leads if it's on this. So Representative Riley, did you have? Oh, I think.
I just want to say, Janet, again, so this is such a phenomenal job. Thank you again so much. It's very helpful and very detailed and very, very thorough.
You're welcome. That's why I might look tired.
Yeah, and it's on a ridiculously short turnaround too. It's awesome. Representative Corey.
Oh. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as I was sort of going through this, like something I found kind of interesting was sort of the penalties, section for each one of these. 194 defines it pretty well. What I did find really interesting was that with regard to 479, especially in the section where it starts talking about prohibitions against non-foreign actors in this, like I can see that like under federal law, we have sort of knowingly solicit, knowingly provide. And then in LD 479, we have intentionally, knowingly, or recklessly, which is, that starts to mirror criminal law, meaning that that's the mens rea that, sort of talks about what state of mind somebody was in when they did, this type of thing. And then what gets interesting is that, as we scroll down, into the penalty items, like this doesn't really become clear. You even said some violations would be a Class E crime under 21A. But for other, violations, there's no penalty. What's also interesting is that, if somebody gave, one of these items, obviously you're not going from a foreign country, like, is it possible to even chase them down with some kind of a penalty for having done so, within criminal law, which I think this is what this is starting to mirror, or no, could you explain that a little bit?
First, do you mind if I go through those sections? Because I didn't get through that part of 479 yet. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah, let's keep going. Yeah.
But I think those are great questions. So if I don't remember them all, remind me.
Yeah, and we've experienced some of that too with the casino referendum. Representative Chiazzo, did you have a question for now, or okay?
I did, Mr. Chair. Thank you. So Janet, this is, and for the committee members, this is why we get emails from Janet at 6 o'clock in the morning, because she spends all of her time doing this. So kudos, excellent analysis as always. The question was brought up in the public hearing about determining percentages of ownership. So is there any mechanism or any means or tests to determine that? How is that determined? And I know sometimes publicly traded companies are not always listed that way. So is there any mechanism in there in the analysis that puts guidelines on how to determine percentage of ownership?
It's not written in the bill itself, and I am not a corporate attorney, nor do I pretend to be one. And I don't actually even have a lot of investments. I'm a state worker after all. But I will say that there was a proposed amendment which sort of gets to that from freespeechforthepeople.org. I think that maybe that's something you want to consider. But as far as in the bill itself, it doesn't say how to do that. I'm sure people who are savvy investors, and maybe if you're a corporation, you might have some ideas how to do it. There's a letter from a Professor Coates that gets into a lot of that. That was submitted, I think, also by freespeechforthepeople.org. But I'd have to defer to people with expertise on that.
Right. And I think that's something that that we'll have to consider if we choose to move forward on how we'll determine that. Those
I just want,
percentages.
I just want to be clear. So there's nothing in statute right now that determines a means in order to do that. There is a mechanism probably somewhere to do it, but there's nothing in statute that determines a prescription of how to do that.
Not in these bills. I don't know about every main law about corporations. No.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, so those complicated, perhaps, depending on your perspective, definition of entities, although there was some testimony that this is not so complicated after all. I just can't tell you which side of that's true. And then all of these other definitions, foreign national, all of those types of foreign nationals under Representative Bailey's bill are, like under federal law, prohibited from making directly or indirectly a contribution to influence a candidate election. So that's the same. And then they add, the bill adds a prohibition that's similar to the other bills before you, which is preventing the making directly or indirectly of an expenditure to influence a referendum election. So his bill addresses both types of election. Also, like federal law, it prohibits making or directly or indirectly a contribution to a political party, a subject not addressed in the other bills before you. He also prohibits making directly or indirectly an independent expenditure or a regular expenditure for an electioneering communication. So unlike the other two bills, actually defines electioneering communication and uses the definition. That's the definition you may be familiar with from current law about when there has to be a disclaimer whether this particular advertisement or statement was authorized by the candidate or not. You're probably way more familiar with me than that than I am, because I've never been a candidate. The bill also prohibits the making directly or indirectly an expenditure to design, produce, or disseminate a communication to promote or oppose a candidate or a political party. I put that in bold just because it was different and I didn't want it to be buried in the language. It's not, I don't care whether it's a yes or no on your part. I just didn't want you to think it was buried in the chart and you missed it. It also prohibits the dissemination or republishing of a candidate's authorized campaign materials by all of those foreign nationals. There isn't a prohibition on participating in the decision-making processes for an entity and its decision-making processes for electioneering, but if you remember, that is actually built into the foreign national definition. So if you participate in the decision-making processes as a foreigner that meets some of the other definitions in the bill, then that entity you're participating in is a foreign national prohibited engaging in these activities at all. You don't need to examine who made the decision anymore. It's already a foreign national. As far as the prohibitions against non-foreign actors, this is one area where Representative Bailey's bill differs quite a bit, as Representative Corey pointed out, from current federal law, and it's much more comprehensive, as you can see, than the two other bills before you. So like federal law, it prohibits the solicitation, acceptance, or receipt of a prohibited contribution, but the mental state required is different. So under federal law, it's just the knowing solicitation, acceptance, or receipt of these contributions. But under the bill, it's an intentional, knowing, or reckless solicitation or acceptance of these prohibited contributions. Similarly, it prohibits the intentional, knowing, or reckless provision of substantial assistance, whether you're paid or unpaid, in the making, solicitation, acceptance, or receipt of a prohibited contribution. I didn't mean to post the highlighted version here. This is another word I didn't want to be lost. It further prohibits the intentional, knowing, or reckless acceptance of a prohibited independent expenditure, as well as where federal law would prohibit a non-foreign national from providing substantial assistance in the making of these expenditures or independent expenditures by foreign nationals. The bill goes farther and has many more reckless states for prohibiting substantial paid or unpaid acceptance in either the making, which is like federal law, or acceptance, which is the difference, which is why I highlighted it so I wouldn't miss it, of a prohibited expenditure and independent expenditure. So now that I'm babbling on, I'll try and explain what that actually means in the real world. If you are, I'll just use myself as an example because I know that I don't get involved in any elections, so you'll know it's a fake example. if I were to say to a foreign national that I knew, maybe some of my husband's relatives in Brazil, I will provide some assistance to you. You don't even need to pay me, and I'm going to palm off some money to a PAC that's going to be broadcasting some campaign commercials against Senator Lucchini. I would be in trouble, not just with him, but perhaps with the Ethics Commission under this bill. If I worked for the PAC and I said, here, let me help you get some money from my husband's relatives in Brazil, that would also be a problem. So it's not just whether I help the foreign national, it would be also whether I'm accepting the money or providing assistance in the acceptance of the money from the US counterpart. There are also additional prohibitions that aren't in federal law or the other bills that require broadcasters, which are defined to include television, radio, cable, satellite, or internet platforms. All of those broadcasters under the bill must have policies reasonably designed to ensure that they don't broadcast communications that are funded by prohibited expenditures or independent expenditures. So I don't know all of the things that would be contemplated by the bill, but I would imagine there would have to do some due diligence and have some kind of policy under this bill to figure out sort of what's the source of the funding for what's being sent to them to broadcast. There's also a requirement in this bill that internet platforms immediately remove any offending communications once they discover them. There's a further disclosure requirement that's unique to Representative Bailey's bill that provides that if a non-prohibited communication, so it's not something about a candidate or about a referendum that's up for election, but it's a communication that's intended to influence state or local government policy or foreign relations. If any of those communications are financed by a foreign national, the foreign national's sponsorship must be conspicuously disclosed on that communication. So for example, if a company in Uruguay wanted to publish in a Maine newspaper, Maine should really form partnerships with Uruguay. There would have to be a disclosure on that, even though there's no election necessarily going on about that right now. There was a federal law pointed out by the Campaign Legal Center, I believe, that requires conspicuous statements on certain information materials where an agent of a foreign principal is involved in making those communications. I don't have any expertise or detailed knowledge of that law, but the Campaign Legal Center suggested that that's sort of an analogous requirement to this requirement in Representative Bailey's bill. And others may be able to speak more on that, or we can look into that in the future if you want. As far as penalties, I'm very glad, sincerely, that Representative Corey brought this up, because there aren't penalties like in the other two bills specifically stated in this bill. Some violations would be Class E crimes under current law, and I get into that in the bill analysis a little bit, but do understand that this Class E crime provision applies to any of the campaign finance violations of Title 21A. So as these two bills are drafted, if you do something that violates these bills that's also within the language of that other statute, it's going to be a Class E crime as well. It's just that because there was nothing in the bill itself about the penalties, I was searching for any possible penalty, and this is the only one I could come up with. But when I get to that part of the bill analysis, do understand it applies to any of these bills equally. And this bill does not have an emergency preamble.
Great, thanks, Janet. So that element, it kind of defaults to the standard penalty that's in the election laws for any violation.
Right, so there are standard penalties in many different titles. So just because you get bills before you that don't include any penalties doesn't automatically mean there aren't any penalties. You have to look around in the statute, and that's sort of what our job is to do for you, and try and find, is there already a penalty somewhere? I think it might be helpful to just click on this now. It's at the bottom of the other bill analysis. But this is a provision of current law that establishes Class E crimes within Title 21A in the campaign finance laws. And this first subsection says a person, candidate, treasurer, political committee, or political action committee cannot knowingly make or accept any contribution or make any expenditure in violation of this chapter. So to the extent any violations are made of the bills provisions, any of the three bills provisions that involve the knowing making or acceptance of a contribution or expenditure that would violate the provisions of those bills, they would all qualify as Class E crimes. I have no idea if these are ever prosecuted as Class E crimes. That's not something I have any knowledge about, but it is a default provision. There are other provisions of Title 21A making, I just moved to the next section if you missed what I clicked, making sort of default civil penalties, but the way that those penalties are drafted and the way that the language is written, they don't apply to any of these bills. So you either have the civil penalties set forth in 194 or 641, the referendum bills, you either have those set forth or the only thing left is this criminal default provision. If that makes any sense, I sincerely hope it does.
Yeah. Great, thank you, Jan. That's a really helpful side by side of each bill and the elements that are in each. Representative Corey.
Thank you. Just real quick while we're on that, like if we did go ahead and, you know, use some of the elements of 479 sort of in the associated, you know, Class E crimes, would we end up triggering a review by the Criminal Justice Committee on sort of review of those crimes, or no, because it's already defined in statute what those crimes are? Would they be, you know, would we be looking at an impact on our justice system? I know we used to have those reviews when I was in criminal justice, and I was just wondering if we would end up opening ourselves up to having that kind of a review from another committee.
So the honest answer is, in my experience, and I have not been here as long as others, in my experience, if the bill doesn't itself say, here's a new Class E crime, it usually doesn't end up going to criminal justice. So where we have a default provision that already exists in statute and says if you violate the contribution rules, you might be guilty of a Class E crime. Usually those types don't go to criminal justice. I think over recent years, there's been more of a trend to maybe looking at that and seeing, but I think it's a definite gray area for which there's not 100% firm answer. There are a lot of provisions in bills that people may not realize. There's some default statute somewhere out there that says potentially this could be a crime, and maybe they just never are prosecuted that way generally, so people don't think about it. So it might be something for a discussion with the chairs of the two committees to see, is this really what you mean? Is that really what you think? I think I wouldn't have raised it as an issue because it doesn't create the crime itself, but that doesn't mean that's not the way the criminal justice chairs look at it. So
a lot of the time it's whether or not it assesses an impact on the system is why they look at it. It has, you know, less to do with it creating a crime and more to do if they feel like it will actually impact the system. Like, you know, people would be, you know, becoming justice involved because they committed this crime. But I imagine that this would probably affect very few individuals. So I don't know.
So that was the chart that I wanted to start with. But here's the actual bill analysis itself. I just didn't summarize the laws here because I already had it in a chart. I didn't want to repeat myself and bore you to death from listening to my voice too much.
No, I think this is all really, really helpful because obviously if the committee chooses to move forward with something, just given the history of everything related to CMP and the corridor, there's going to be lawsuits around it. So it's something that we want to certainly take our time and take an in-depth look at all these elements, because we'll probably get sued if, when whatever happens. It tends to be the MO of this current campaign that's running.
I did want to actually point out, because I'm a lawyer and we do disclaimers, I'm not always going to be able to do this much work on something. I saw the writing on the wall, saw this coming, and there had been a similar bill that I was able to pull a lot of resources from last session. So once our bill load increases as it is right now, please do not expect me to do all of this for every bill, or I will literally crack up.
It's very true. We would need like an army of people to do this much work if it was for every bill.
Okay, so just some additional information. There is a current federal law. We went through what its provisions are. There was some suggestion at the public hearing that perhaps the federal law really doesn't just apply to candidate elections. It might apply to all elections. I went through here and quoted for you the statutes and the regulations that show that currently it really does only apply to candidate elections. But it may be that I misunderstood what the person was saying. So I did want to note for you, however, that there is a bill that's been passed by the US House and it's pending in the US Senate, and it would amend federal law in several ways, including by applying its provisions to state and local referendum elections. So perhaps that was really what the person who was testifying was saying, and they weren't really confused on the issue. So I just wanted to clarify that for you. It is only candidate elections now for federal law. Perhaps I don't ever pretend to progress to predict what will happen in Congress, but perhaps someday it will be changed. And then it's important to understand, because I think that both the people testifying and then my sense sort of the background of this issue is that one of the key things you're all going to consider is this degree of foreign ownership for corporations, and how does that play out, and what do you want to do on that if you even want to move forward on these bills. And it's important to understand that if you remember, the federal law just says in its definitions that a foreign national would include a foreign business entity, so a partnership, association, corporation, organization, or other combination of persons. And under federal law, it's only if they're organized under the laws of or having their principal place of business in a foreign country. So if you read that definition, you might think that no domestic corporation ever has any prohibitions as far as influencing elections under federal law. But it's important to remember, so that you understand why there are some domestic businesses that are affected, is that the federal law prohibits both direct and indirect contributions and expenditures by foreign nationals. In addition, as I pointed out in the chart, the FEC regulations implementing this statute prohibit a foreign national from directing, controlling, or directly or indirectly participating in the campaign contribution and expenditure decision-making processes of any domestic business, PAC, or other organization in connection with elections for any federal, state, or local office. So what does that mean? Although the federal definition of foreign national does not expressly include domestic subsidiaries of foreign businesses, the FEC has some guidance information. If you click here, you can look at it. It's right online. And it explains that under current federal law, a domestic subsidiary of a foreign corporation may make contributions and expenditures in connection with state and local candidate elections only if two conditions are met. First, the foreign parent or foreign owner of the subsidiary may not finance the activities in any part. Put differently, the domestic subsidiary must be able to demonstrate it has sufficient funds other than funds given or loaned by the foreign parent or owner to account for the donations or expenditures that is making in association with candidate elections. In addition, individuals who are neither US citizens nor permanent residents may not be involved in making the decisions regarding these political activities. So as I read all three of these bills, all three of them prohibit the making of direct or indirect contributions or expenditures, either just for referendums or also for referendum or candidate elections. And they all prohibit this participation in decision-making process. So I think no matter what degree of foreign ownership you put in, even if you put no degree of foreign ownership in and you just look at organizations organized under the law of a foreign country or with their principal place of business out of the US, just like the federal law, you're still going to have these two requirements if the main law is interpreted like the federal law is, and I don't know why it wouldn't be. There were some requests for information about other states. This is the part in Appendix 2, which I'm not going to go through. It's very long, but just know that there's a nice long chart there. This was the stuff I started over the interim. So this chart is not something I can pull together that quickly. And the whole first chart I put together, there's a second chart that talks about non-referendum states. And that was created by our analyst, Kristen Braun, who did do that within a very few days. So I want to thank her publicly now. But As far as other states, of the 25 other states identified by NCSL that permit citizens to propose legislation either through direct initiatives or popular referenda, 12 limit foreign interference in elections to some degree that we were able to find. So even though these are states that allow initiatives and popular referenda, the laws that they've enacted affect different types of elections. So of those 12 states, 3 of them, their prohibitions apply only to candidate elections. 2 of them, their prohibitions apply only to referendum elections, so they've taken a different approach. And 7 of them apply at least to some extent to both candidate and referendum elections. And I think it's Colorado where it's not really that much about candidate elections. There's just a little bit in there about some LLCs and their ownership that applies to candidate elections. So there are 5 additional states, and these are states that don't allow citizens to propose legislation through initiatives or referendum that also limit foreign interference in elections to some degree. So if we add that to the 12, that's 17 states that we were able to find that have some kind of law limiting foreign interference with elections, at least financial interference. So the types of foreign entity, which is really what I think a lot of the discussion has been and might still focus on. So we thought we'd just summarize that at more of a higher level for you. 6 of those states' prohibition expressly adopt the federal definition of foreign national. 4 of them don't necessarily adopt the federal definition explicitly, but if you look at the definitions, they're essentially the same entities as foreign nationals under federal law. So that's 10 out of the 17 states basically use the federal definition of foreign national. 2 of the state statutes are written in a way that would theoretically apply to more business entities than the strictly foreign organized or foreign located business entities covered under federal law. The first is Alaska, and Alaska has a definition of a foreign influence corporation, which is in addition to foreign nationals prohibited from making contributions and expenditures. Its definition includes, very similar to Representative Bailey's bill, entities where a single foreign owner holds more than 5% of the equity or a group of owners own more than 20% of the voting equity. But there's a reason to believe that that provision of Alaska's law isn't actually effective. And that's because there's another provision of the statute that says that the law's prohibitions against foreign influence corporations' contributions and expenditures apply only to the extent that federal law prohibits those contributions or expenditures. And so if you click on this blue suggested word here, there's an opinion from the Alaska Attorney General, which was actually dealing with a separate question about whether a referendum could go to the voters and whether language of different bills was the same. But if you read through it, it suggests that the state statutes prohibitions against contributions by foreign influence corporations, this broader group, may not actually be effective. So I think Alaska, while it looks like it's a broader definition of entities, actually probably falls under this, not expressly adopting federal law, but applying essentially to the same entities group. In addition, California, their prohibition expressly applies to domestic entity subsidiaries, of foreign corporations if the decision to make the contribution or expenditure is made by a non-US citizen and non-permanent resident officer of the foreign parent. So while that putting it in statute differs from the way that the federal law is written, as I've explained to you, the FEC interprets federal law to include those corporations. So again, it's a definition that looks broader, but it's actually the same because that's how federal law is interpreted currently. There are 3 states which have a narrower prohibition or narrower definition of foreign national, so it applies to fewer foreign businesses in the sense that they prohibit contributions and expenditures only from a foreign corporation that is not authorized to conduct business in that state. So that's the route those 3 states chose. There's 1 state where the prohibition applies to the undefined term foreign national, as well as foreign governments, instrumentalities, or agents. And that's New Jersey, and that's a state that doesn't have initiatives and referendums, so it's a candidate only kind of a state. And then the last state, South Dakota, their prohibition only applies if the contributor is a foreign government. So for more information for those, you can look at this chart and see the actual language. And Kristen very kindly put in hyperlinks to every single one of those statutes for me, or for you really. As far as the types of businesses, these are concerns that were raised in the public hearing testimony. Concerns were raised that on the one hand, a publicly traded company may not have sufficient information at each point in time to ascertain, as required by 194 and 479, what percentage of its equity is held by a single foreign owner or a combination of foreign owners. Nor may a publicly traded company prevent foreign owners or entities from obtaining a specific percentage of their equity. So that was another concern raised by people who were opposed to these bills. But on the other hand, concerns were raised that the definitions of foreign national in these three bills may in fact be too narrow, because foreign individuals and entities who own or control as little as 1% of a company's equity wield significant influence, according to the people testifying in this way, over corporate decision-making, including decisions regarding election spending. So there's sort of two different sides to that concern about business entities. There were also constitutional issues raised in the public hearing. So the bill's opponents argued that each bill violates the First Amendment, especially to the extent that the bills propose to limit the election-related activities of domestic companies partially owned by foreign nationals. The bill's proponents, however, counter that foreign nationals do not enjoy a First Amendment right to participate in US elections. So you may have heard the Blumen decision referred to several times in the testimony. So in that case, Blumen versus the Federal Election Commission, the US District Court for the District of Columbia, that's the federal trial court level, although it was sitting as a panel, so it was sort of a higher level case, held that the federal law that we've summarized before does not violate the First Amendment rights of individuals who are present in the United States on temporary work visas. So the Blumen case was a case brought by individuals who are temporarily in the United States. It is not a case about corporations. Then Judge Kavanaugh, writing a decision that was later summarily affirmed by the US Supreme Court, so it is Supreme Court precedent, although the Supreme Court didn't write its own decision. Then Judge Kavanaugh concluded that the United States has a compelling interest for purposes of First Amendment analysis in limiting the participation of foreign citizens in activities of American democratic self-government, and in thereby preventing foreign influence over the US political process. The Blumen Court observed in a footnote that its holding would apply equally to foreign corporations, which it suggested may be likewise barred from making contributions and expenditures in connection with candidate elections. So even though that case was just about individuals on temporary work visas, the court just noted it's not precedent law, it's what they call dicta because it's in the side saying, but it did say that it thought it was very clear that fully foreign corporations are being barred from making contributions and expenditures doesn't violate the First Amendment. The court explicitly did not decide several critical issues that bear on the question whether these three bills can withstand similar First Amendment challenges, however. The first issue the court specifically did not decide was whether Congress could constitutionally extend the statutory ban to lawful permanent residents who have a more significant attachment to the United States than the temporary resident plaintiffs in this case. Any such extension would raise substantial questions, the court said, that were not raised if you just apply the law to non-citizens temporarily present within the country. So just to remind you, the federal law does not have prohibitions against permanent residents, which is why that question wasn't before the court. But they were just saying that we don't know if it would be allowed. That's something to be decided in the future if there is to be a prohibition enacted against permanent residents. Ballot measure campaigns is a second issue. So the Blumen Court decision did not address, it specifically said we do not address whether Congress had the authority to prohibit foreign nationals from engaging in issue advocacy, which it defined as speech that does not expressly advocate the election or defeat of a candidate. And thus, the court cautioned its holding should not be read to support such bans. So the bill's opponents note that in cases upholding limited restrictions on candidate contributions against First Amendment challenges, so other kinds of cases like Citizens United or other candidate-related contribution or expenditure cases, the U.S. Supreme Court has recognized only a single compelling government interest in preventing quid pro quo corruption or the appearance of such corruption. So there are cases like Buckley versus Vallejo, which say you can limit the total maximum amount of contribution because of the idea that the citizenry might perceive some kind of quid pro quo corruption when a candidate gets a huge amount of money from a specific donor. By contrast, the bill's opponents observe, the U.S. Supreme Court has concluded that the risk of corruption perceived in cases involving candidate elections simply is not present in referendum elections, and therefore there is no significant state or public interest in curtailing debate and discussion of a ballot measure. So just to put that in a practical sense, if the ballot question is whether 16-year-olds can vote or not, that was something that you discussed earlier today. A huge donation to the ballot question committee of individuals, even 16 and 17-year-olds, if they're that committee, donating to them isn't going to get you a quid pro quo favor because the 16 and 17-year-olds aren't running the government as a result, and so they can't then bestow a favor on you. That's sort of the idea behind why ballot questions are treated differently. So while that line of cases demonstrates that restrictions on campaign spending to influence the outcome of ballot questions are more constitutionally suspect, suggesting that the bills may be more vulnerable to First Amendment challenges than the federal law, which focuses solely on candidate contributions, it is difficult to actually predict whether this reasoning applies to these bills in light of the Blumen Court's recognition of a second compelling government interest in preventing foreign influence over U.S. elections. It is possible that a court examining the question, if a challenge is brought, will conclude that this second compelling interest in preventing foreign interference in elections is equally valid in the candidate and referendum context. So it may be that in addition to quid pro quo corruption, which has always been the only compelling interest in this area, there may now be a second one, and that's not limited to candidate elections. It's really hard for me to say. So then the third thing that the Blumen Court didn't address was domestic corporations with foreign ownership. So when it observed that foreign corporations lack a First Amendment right to participate in candidate elections, the Blumen Court cautioned that it had no occasion to analyze the circumstances under which a corporation may be considered a foreign corporation for purposes of First Amendment analysis. And that italics is from the case, so they were emphasizing that. We're not deciding what makes a corporation truly foreign for the purposes of the First Amendment. So the bill's proponents argue on the one hand that the First Amendment does not mandate that foreign individuals and businesses be permitted to use the shield of a domestic corporate form to engage indirectly in the types of political activity that they may constitutionally be prohibited from engaging in directly. On the other hand, an argument could be made that as domestic corporations, partially foreign-owned corporations are protected by the First Amendment. As a consequence, it appears that an argument could be made that the bills may be vulnerable to attack as not narrowly tailored, which is a test for First Amendment restrictions, because rather than broadly restricting the speech of entities with a certain percent of foreign ownership, the bills could instead, like federal law, merely prevent foreign interference in state elections by more narrowly prohibiting foreign funding of and participation in a domestic entity's campaign-related finance activities. So you may notice that I didn't follow exactly the words that I wrote in my bill analysis, because at the time that I wrote this so that it could get posted in time for today, we did not have the actual submissions from Mr. Woodcock or Attorney Woodcock, who has since then submitted his argument. So I was trying to guess from my recollection of his testimony what that argument would be. But even if he wouldn't only argue this, this is an argument that could be made, and it's something you should be aware of. He has many more arguments in his testimony that he submitted. It may be helpful for you to know that in the 129th legislature, this committee considered LD 2136, a bill that would have prohibited foreign nationals, including domestic entities with respect to which a foreign individual, foreign government, or foreign entity owned or controlled at least 50% of the equity, from making contributions or expenditures to influence a referendum election. In a letter from August of 2020, the Maine Attorney General opined that the law in this area of campaign finance regulation is unsettled. This uncertainty makes it difficult to predict the outcome of a legal challenge to that bill, which is why I'm not in a position to predict it, because if the Attorney General's office can, there's no way I can. I am not as expert as they are in this area of the law. So a copy of that letter has been posted to the LD file for each of these bills, because I thought it might be helpful for you to read through the different considerations that the Attorney General thought you might want to consider, at least as far as that referendum election bill in the last session. The sponsor proposed amendments to the bill during his testimony. He spoke very quickly, and I listened to it, and I thought that he was going to follow exactly what the Campaign Legal Center had proposed in its written testimony. But since I wrote this bill analysis, he has in fact submitted his proposed amendments. I'm just going to show you where they are real fast. So if you look at this electronic LD file, there's the proposed amendment from Representative Bailey. Karen actually emailed it to you, and then I had, during a break, I posted it online. So you can see that here, his proposed language changes, which are, he would like to amend the bill to make it clear in the section where it says that foreign nationals can't disseminate or republish candidates' authorized campaign materials. He wants to make it clear that they can't spend money in doing that. If they want to volunteer for a campaign, then they can go ahead and do so. They just can't spend money on disseminating or republishing a candidate's campaign materials. In addition, he wanted to add a ban on contributions in connection with ballot measures, because the bill as it's currently drafted prohibits expenditures and independent expenditures by foreign nationals with relationship to ballot measures, but it doesn't prohibit contributions. And my comment, which is on the bill analysis, that you need a different definition of contribution. He now references the right definition of contribution. It didn't matter in the bill as it was drafted, but if you add this prohibition, you need this. So that's the same suggestion I made. My only further comment would be, if you want to go forward with this, I'd need some authority to work with the Ethics Commission, because that definition of contribution only applies to political action committees. It doesn't apply to ballot question committees. I actually think that if I talk to the Ethics Commission, it's supposed to, this definition apply to ballot question committees equally. But if you're going to make this definition used to talk about contributions in connection with a ballot measure, you'd probably want it to apply to both. I'm just guessing here, but I would think you would. And then the third proposal the sponsor had was to clarify that the ban applies to spending on expenditures, independent expenditures, and electioneering communications. So this isn't a specific part of the bill. This is not something I got from his testimony, so I'd have to look at this further to make sure I really understand it, but he's explained it here for you to review. I promise I'm almost done. Okay, so
we're all feverishly writing notes. That's what's going on.
We're all back to the amendments proposed at the public hearing. So those are the sponsor of LD 479, Representative Bailey's proposed amendments, some of which were also proposed by the Campaign Legalist Center, if you look in their testimony. John Brodigan of the Maine Citizens for Clean Elections and Ron Fine of Free Speech for People.org also proposed amending the definition of foreign national in Representative Bailey's bill to include domestic entities where a single foreign owner holds 1% or more of the equity, or a combination of foreign owners owns 5% or more of the equity. So this would decrease the foreign ownership threshold for a domestic entity to be prohibited from participating in elections. So that was there, and they have a whole bunch of information in their testimony on why they believe that's the appropriate way to go, which I can't comment on because I don't understand corporate governance to the degree others may. This is something that this next proposed amendment is related to Representative Chiazzo's question earlier. So Ron Fine from Free Speech for People.org proposed adding a new provision to LD 479, which is Representative Bailey's bill, which would state that any kind of entity that engages in covered activity, which is all of your expenditures and contributions and et cetera and so forth to influence the elections, would have to prepare a statement of certification that would be signed by the chief executive officer under penalty of perjury, avowing that after due inquiry, that entity is not a foreign national on the date that it made that contribution or expenditure or other conduct covered activity. So it would have to, anytime it wants to make a contribution or expenditure or disseminate campaign materials or whatever it's going to do that would be prohibited of a foreign national, that entity would have to actually certify, we did our due diligence, and we don't have the right amount of foreign ownership to put us over the threshold and to be prohibited. This amendment would also provide that the organization would have to, within 7 business days after making the expenditure or contribution, file that certificate with the Ethics Commission and provide a copy of the certificate to the recipient of the contribution or expenditure. And it further says that they would be entitled to rely upon it in good faith. That would be the recipient. So I would note that if this is under penalty of perjury, perjury is a Class C crime under the criminal law, and Class C crimes are punishable by a maximum of 5 years imprisonment and a fine of up to $5,000. The person making the certification is the CEO, so I don't believe that this would be perjury by the corporation. I think it would be perjury by that individual themselves. That's at least how I read the statute. So that's why I gave you the individual penalties. The penalties for organizations are different. You can't obviously imprison an organization, but you can fine them, and they do have higher fines than individuals do under our criminal code. I do have some questions about this proposed amendment. It talks about the CEO making this certification, and I'm not sure all of these entities have CEOs. The federal law that's pending right now has a very similar provision, and it says the CEO or highest officer or something like that if there isn't a CEO. So there's some language floating around out there that we could consider if you wanted to go down this path. I also had a question for whether there would be failure to make such a certification, and would failure, and the reason I asked that question is, as we discussed before, the penalties are not clear for LD 479 violations, and this is a proposal for 479. So you'd need to consider what you want the penalty to be. And then also, this proposal says that if you receive a contribution or expenditure, you're the recipient, you're allowed to rely upon the certificate that you receive from the corporation. And I'm wondering, does that mean that failure to receive a certificate would automatically subject the person who receives the contribution or expenditure to the penalties under the law? Because you would say, well, you didn't receive a certificate, so therefore you are knowing or reckless, or whatever the case may be, looking at those mental states, and therefore you're in violation just because you didn't get a certificate, or is more required? So that's something to consider. Mr. Fine from freespeechforpeople.org also had a proposal that the committee consider whether to clarify and expand the types of trade associations considered foreign nationals under the bill. A different attorney, Mr. Fitzgerald, in his testimony suggested amending Representative Bailey's bill to include what's called a qui tam provision. And that's a provision of law that authorizes individuals to file complaints either in court or before administrative bodies. So here that would be the Ethics Commission. And if they do so, and that complaint or court action is successful, then under qui tam law, the person has a right who filed the complaint to receive a portion of the award to the government. Under federal law, it's not 50%, but he was proposing maybe a 50% fine might help encourage other people to sort of police what's going on and file enforcement actions. He also suggested including legislative findings and purposes, which is something you all may want to consider, whether because of the reasons he gave in his testimony or just anytime the legislature is worried about the potential constitutional challenges being brought. That is one of the only times the revisor's office sort of views legislative findings and purposes as appropriate to put in statute, because sometimes those can be relied upon if there is a court challenge, and they can be relied upon by the Attorney General's office as these are the findings that the legislature made and why they thought that this law was required. And as you know, the First Amendment, if it is implicated by this bill and if it's brought up, or these bills, and if that challenge is brought in court, they sort of look at balancing the compelling interests versus narrow tailoring. So those might be things that the legislature might weigh in on in findings and purposes. Whether a court would be compelled by them is a different question, but it's one of those areas where purposes sometimes are written in statute. And then there was another gentleman, Mr. Searoyce, who suggested amending any of the three bills to prohibit out-of-state businesses from making contributions or expenditures to influence Maine referendum elections. This is an area where I haven't done a ton of research, but I would note that in a footnote to one of the states in the chart, I can't remember which state, you will see that it had a prohibition on out-of-state contributions and expenditures, and that was stricken down by a court as unconstitutional in violation of the First Amendment. So we could do more research on that if you want to go that way, but that might be problematic. Again, it would require more investigation. So then if you want to go forward with these bills for 194 and 641, there are some definition issues that I identified for you that you can read sort of at your leisure, because I don't think you're going to vote today. If you are going to vote today, I'm happy to go through them. But there were some more sort of substantive in nature issues with LD 479, Representative Bailey's bill. So the first question is what the penalty is for violating each of the prohibitions and requirements of that bill. As I mentioned before, current law makes it a Class E crime for a person, candidate, treasurer, political committee, or political action committee to knowingly make or accept any contribution or make any expenditure in violation of all the provisions within that chapter of Title 21A, but not all of the prohibitions in the bill fit that definition. There's prohibitions on soliciting, not just accepting prohibited contributions. There are some prohibitions that talk about a reckless state of mind, which would not be covered, so it wouldn't fall under the crime. There are prohibitions about providing substantial assistance to engage in the improper contributions or expenditures, and those aren't going to fall under that crime. And then there are some provisions that you may remember about broadcasters and internet platforms having some policies to prevent disseminating improper communications that are improperly funded. It's not clear to me what the penalty is for that. It certainly doesn't fall under that Class E crime. And those are things you should think about. Even if it were to fall under the Class E crime, you may or may not want to put in a civil penalty as well or instead of. So that's all stuff to consider. And then finally, there is that provision that requires internet platforms not only to have the policies to try and prevent communicating or publishing the communications that might be prohibited because they were funded by a foreign national, but there's also a provision of Representative Bailey's bill that requires an internet platform to immediately take down an offending communication. And I would note for you, under the Federal Communications Decency Act, no provider or user of an interactive computer service shall be treated as the publisher or speaker of any information provided by another information content provider. In addition, under that federal law, no cause of action may be brought and no liability may be imposed under any state or local law that's inconsistent with this principle. So for that reason, based on that federal law, I just pose for you whether you want to define internet platform, whether you want to include what would be considered an interactive computer service, or whether you wouldn't want to, given the federal prohibitions on imposing liability based on their posting of information. And just so you know, the interactive computer services that are protected under federal law are the types of services that provide a platform for other people to post their ideas, like your Facebook or roommates.com or something like that. You can see this is a Zuckerberg case, so you can guess the website there. By contrast, however, a website that creates and develops its own content is not an interactive computer service that's protected by federal law. So the Bangor Daily News is an internet site. It creates its own content, so it isn't protected by this federal law for the types of things that it posts, although it may have some First Amendment protections, obviously freedom of the press. And then there's another little definitional issue that I raised. There were many requests for information. Mr. Brodigan
today, I think it was, it might have been last night, did provide a response to this, and I had it posted on the electronic LD file, I believe. Yeah, actually he submitted himself on that, but he posted it as testimony. And then there's a link to a chart that he has of the different campaigns in Maine. Ms. Brochu from Hydro-Quebec offered to provide information on Quebec's laws. That is available online, as is Tim Woodcock's. I do want to show you, if you want the information on the Quebec laws, it's not actually listed under Ms. Brochu's name. It's this here, Michelle McLean from Hydro-Quebec. If you click on that, that'll give you the information about Quebec laws on referendums and their foreign national prohibitions. So I'm going to stop sharing so everybody can see questions.
Thank you, Janet. I think my hand hurts from all the writing. That was incredibly thorough. Questions, comments from the committee? Senator Hickman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For anyone that might be wondering why I wanted to come back on this committee in particular, it's precisely because of the work of Janet Stocco, who amazes me and absolutely exercises my brain around the law like no other analyst that I've ever worked with. So you have given me a lot to consider here. Thank you for the thorough approach to this. And I've got some reading to do before we decide how we're going to report this bill out. Thank you.
Thank you. I did have a little help, as I mentioned. And don't expect this every time when we have 30 work sessions in a week. It's not going to happen.
Understood. Representative Corey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had this question as we were going through the charts before, but it looks like it came up in that last piece sort of regarding internet platforms and, you know, where, you know, certain kinds of ads can be set up. I know that there are static websites out there where they're not serving their own ads, meaning that, you know, somebody pays to have, you know, a box on there where they're serving ads into that box, and the person that owns that website doesn't necessarily control what ads are being served into that box. Would they be, if they were having, like, say, you know, a company's ad served into that box, or referendums ads, would they be liable even though it's not static? They have a static website?
That's an excellent question. There's no definition of internet platform at all. So my guess is as good as yours. My suggestion would be, if you care about all of the intricacies and nuances of that, maybe making a definition if you wanted to go forward with that bill, and just defining which types of platforms are required to take it down and which aren't.
Okay.
Okay, Senator Hickman, did you have a follow-up or?
Not at this time.
Okay, I just, your hand's still up, so I'm sorry. I know it's all, we're always looking for the button, the magic button. With me, it's the mute button, so. Any other questions for Janet? Okay, well, I've got a couple, and I don't, you know, again, this is, if these can't be answered, that's fine. I was trying to keep notes as I'm going, but, you know, it flowed very quickly. It's a lot of information to digest for sure. So I think it was with LD 479 on one of the amendments, there was a mention of allowing foreign entities or their I don't want to say their to volunteer for stuff. So I guess my question would be, would that mean in-kind contributions would be allowed, but direct contributions are not, or is it just specifically for that volunteering aspect of it, or is that unclear?
No, so let me back up a little bit. So LD 479, it applies to both candidates and referendums, so it has slightly different definitions of contribution, and it borrows, for the definition of contribution, it borrows the definition that applies with candidate campaigns, which is in section 1012, subsection 2. Sorry, I clicked the wrong button on my screen. here. Let me just go there because I think that might help answer your question. So this is the definition of contribution that applies anyway to candidate kind of campaign finance law. And it does say that it includes certain things and it excludes certain things. So it does include already the value of services that are volunteer, some other things that don't exceed $250. There are all sorts of voluntary things built in. But if you look at LD 479, sorry, I'm just showing you how I find all these things in case it's helpful for you to find them. So LD 479, if you see, borrows that definition right here, the definition of contribution that has some exceptions for volunteering. And why does that definition matter? If you look down here at the prohibitions, the foreign national as defined in that bill cannot make a contribution to candidate or to influence candidate elections. So as far as that goes, there would be this built-in volunteer exception. But what the bill sponsor noted and asked for an amendment on is not actually that subsection, it's here, subsection 3. And this provision says that a foreign national cannot disseminate or republish in whole or in part any of the campaign materials of the candidate or the candidate's committee. There's no volunteer exception built in here, and it's not using the word contribution. So the built-in exceptions for volunteering for the definition of contribution don't apply to this provision. And I think that's why he's saying, can you add in something here that's clarifying that if it's only doing something without spending any money, that it's fine. Okay. So it's just about this provision here. The only other time contribution came up was in the proposal from the sponsor. If you look here, it's contributions about candidate elections, contributions to parties, expenditures for electioneering communications. Those are candidate related communications, expenditures to promote or oppose the nomination of a candidate, and then finally expenditures about ballot questions. And he pointed out that he would like you to amend the bill to add contributions about ballot measures. And if that's true, you can't use the same definition of contribution because the definition in the bill is only for candidates. So you'd use a different definition, the one that's about ballot questions. The problem is that definition is written in a way that might need to be fixed a little bit because it doesn't include ballot question committees, which sort of seems not helpful if you're trying to get at referendum elections. But that's something, if you wanted to go down that road, I would be happy to talk to Jonathan Wayne, the executive director of the Ethics Commission, about make sure that however we fix that definition, it wouldn't have any unintended consequences in other areas of the law.
All right. So just so I'm clear, as it relates to candidates, this reference is basically as it exists with candidates. There's a separate requirement for initiatives, ballot initiatives, and the two are not necessarily equivalent. We'd have to make some kind of correction if we want to include ballots in this one.
Right. If you look here, this definition, so expenditures are also defined here. Yep. I'm not going to go up to them, but they're defined by reference to the law that talks about candidates. And so for this one provision, which is talking about ballot questions, it borrows the definition of expenditure that has to do with PACs and ballot question committees. Well, you'd have to do the same thing if you added a prohibition about contributions to ballot question things. You'd have to, again, borrow that definition. And if you look at the sponsor's proposal, he does that. My only issue is if you actually look at the definition you're borrowing, it might need a little bit of tweaking. And that may just be an underlying issue in the law. That's not something that the sponsor made as a problem. It's just something that we could fix in the law anyway. That's why I'd want to talk to the director of the Ethics Commission to make sure in fixing the law, we don't ruin the law.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Makes sense. Unintended consequences across the board. Senator Farron, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hey, Janet, you really good break there about the other states that have similar bills or laws in place about the outside foreign influence. And you specifically mentioned the one lawsuit that tried to target the out-of-state money, and that was an issue. Do we know if any of those other states, if there was any legal challenges to their laws that they have on the books?
So what we did when we looked at these laws is we looked on Westlaw, which is there's Westlaw and Lexis. We just happen to use Westlaw, which is a legal research tool, and it reports the cases it knows about. And it did not, if you look and you check for any kind of challenges, it didn't report any challenges about the foreign contributions. That doesn't mean there weren't lower court decisions that didn't make it to the service, but as far as reported cases that are available on widely used legal research, we didn't see any.
Thank you very much.
I get another one, Janet. When we were talking about the level of investment, I know this is probably more of a corporate compliance issue, and it mentions, investment or ownership by a foreign entity. I guess my question would be, was there any indication as to how many degrees of separation you need for that? Does it need to be direct investment? What if there are funds that are investing in an organization and they happen to have a percentage of ownership? I mean, I didn't hear anything in the definition, and I know this is more of a corporate governance kind of thing. I didn't hear any definitions of whether it would limit it to direct investment, direct ownership, or indirect ownership, and it seemed like it was obviously complex for sure.
So for the federal law, which exists now, the FEC has that explanation on its website that I gave you the link for in the bill analysis. And reading that, I had at one point over the interim, when I had a lot of extra time, read a lot of the actual FEC enforcement things. I didn't have time to reread them all now. But it talks about your direct contributions would be if it's the foreign business. Your indirect would be the foreign business has a subsidiary, it's funding through the subsidiary the campaign activity. If the foreign entity has a domestic subsidiary, which then itself has another subsidiary, I don't know how far down the road. Right. I think if somebody could make a really strong argument that you trace the money all exactly came from that foreign corporation, there'd be a strong argument that violates the indirect, but I don't know how far those challenges have gone or how they've come out. I will say Representative Bailey's bill does talk about foreign owner. So the whole 5% threshold, if it's one foreign owner, or 20% threshold, if it's a combination of foreign owners. And then the definition of foreign owner is a majority foreign owned entity, unless that majority ownership is through widely held diversified funds. I don't pretend to understand all of that, but I think what that means is like the money market or something like that, where it's widely held, CalPERS, I don't know if that's what they're talking about, where you don't necessarily know all the little details of every little bit. You're not going to be adding up that ownership to figure out if it goes across the threshold. So there is a little bit of that, and that's more detail in Representative Bailey's bill than is even in the federal law at all.
Yeah, and I guess I was thinking more along the lines, if you had an industry consortium, let's say, that happens to be an international consortium, but they're US, if they have a percentage of foreign ownership or contributions to that consortium or group, does that then qualify that group, even though if they're domestic, if they have a predominance of international investors, does that preclude them from contributing to ballot initiatives? No.
That's a good question. So the widely held diversified fund, where those ownership interests aren't considered, is a pooled investment under the bill of more than 100 investors. It has no more than 5% of its investment in any single issuer other than a federal government, invests no more than 20% of its value in any one economic or geographic sector, and for which no investor or immediate family member of an investor may exercise control over the financial interest held by the pooled investment. So it really is widely held, more than 100 people investing in it, diversified because it's not concentrating its investment in any one place, and it's not controlled by the investors, it's controlled outside. So whether that includes your example, I do not know, but that's what the definition in the bill says.
Gotcha. Okay. pretty complex stuff. I thought it was difficult on EUT, but this has got way more moving parts than that. So this is, I certainly do appreciate the analysis also and the worksheets and a lot to consider for sure. Any other questions for Janet in regards to the analysis? All right. Any other questions that are outstanding that, let me see, we have some attendees. Any other open questions from the committee at all that they'd like at least answered or posed between now and the next work session? As Janet kind of referenced to, I don't think we're in a position to be voting on these today. I mean, I think there's way too much information. We certainly need to digest a little more and wrap our heads around. At least I do. So I think this is really a good informational session. Just kind of kick it off a little bit too. So Representative McCray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Understanding that we're going to take this up again, I'm just aware we have a couple sponsors of 2 of the bills in the participant area. And I just want to make sure at some point we give them an opportunity to respond to all the nuances that have come up, whether now or next time, I don't know.
I'm happy to do that now. If you have specific questions for them, we can bring them in.
Well, not very specific. There's a lot of information, a lot of suggestions, and I just wonder if it would be helpful for them to have a chance to say what this means in terms of their bills. So I don't know if they want to do that right now, but I'd like to hear from them, whether now or next time. They may need to digest as well.
Okay. I would prefer to kind of defer and let it settle in too, unless there are specific questions. I mean, certainly if there are direct questions from the committee, we can bring them in. As you know, I think Senator Bennett's in there and Representative Bailey are both in there. You know, if there are specific questions, I'm absolutely happy to bring them up. But I think maybe we give them the opportunity to let them digest the analysis as well for the next work session, if that's okay.
Sounds good.
Representative Corey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not as smart as Representative McCrate, so I didn't see where you could actually see the attendees until I went to the panelists and then clicked on attendees. But what I was going to mention before she showed this to me and broadened my world, that I was going to say, I really hope that the bill sponsors are listening to this, looking at this analysis and everything else, because we're going to be relying on those sponsors, I think, heavily to, come together. Obviously, the committee is not going to report out three separate bills. Probably, this will all be narrowed down to one bill, and it's going to take, them working together to help get us there. So thank you.
Thank you, Representative Corey. Yeah, obviously there's going to be a lot of discussion around this too, and trying to iron out the details for sure. So a good basis for discussion with Janet's analysis, without a doubt. Any other questions or concerns, comments that we want to make? And this is the committee's opportunity. So Senator Hickman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think whatever we ultimately do, I just want to put the framework out that even if we do something that conflicts with federal law, because we think it's right for people of the state, federal law can also change. And so I just want to make sure that whatever we do isn't necessarily informed by the nuances of federal law, unless our Constitution requires that we can't do anything other than what's in federal law. And I'm not sure that on this issue that is the case. So I just want to put that out to the committee as we think about going forward, because foreign influence in our elections in this country is clearly a top item on people's minds, and the people want us to do something about it. So if those who have a different set of authority have not been willing to take action, we certainly can represent the people of Maine the best by ensuring that if we do go far, we go far enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Hickman. Yeah, I think it's a complex, obviously complex question. I'm always reticent to propose legislation around specific initial issues, that especially something as broad-based as this and as far-reaching as this. So I think it's in all of our best interest to broaden those horizons and see what the broader overall impact is. I mean, clearly this was brought as, it feels like it was brought as a response to a specific project, and that's a catalyst for sure. But I just want to make sure we center this around the bigger picture too, to make sure that there are bigger consequences associated with this as well, that are important. And we really got to look at it from the macro perspective as well, I think. So, any other questions, comments? All right, so I think to keep it clean, it's probably best to address each bill individually. I know we could address them all at once, but maybe just to keep it clean and keep it upfront, we can take each bill individually, and I would be looking for a motion at this point to put this aside for another time. Senator McCrate.
I got a promotion.
Representative McCrate, sorry. I was looking at Senator Lucchini because he's present.
Well, actually, I had a comment. Representative Reisman deferred to Senator Bennett's bill, I believe. And I wonder if is this a time when we would ought not to pass on that bill? Or do you want to leave it alone?
My thought was just just to move table everything right now so that we could work out if we want to combine anything in there or use it. But it's kind of 6 1/2 dozen the other. I think I think with Senator Hickman or Representative Corey's point, we'll probably combine into one bill at some point anyway. But I will defer to Senator Lucchini as well. He had his hand up, so I don't know if that was something you wanted to weigh in on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I'm sorry, I had to step into a different meeting for a while. I think you said it right. Whether we vote now or later, it looks like, I mean, it would make the most sense to use one vehicle. We kind of, depending on, where people are obviously on this bill, there's some decision points that we'll have to make on like who's prohibited, if we ban companies with foreign ownership, then we'd have to determine the threshold and things like that. So, we just have to work through all the issues and then use one as the vehicle to move forward. And I know Director Wayne would be helpful when it comes to like penalties and those types of things. So yeah, we just wanted to really get this first analysis out there because these are 3 complicated bills and it's a complicated issue. We wanted everybody to see the breakdowns, and then we'll give time to really think more. But I know this is super helpful to me to have all of this to understand what's actually in the bills and what the laws are. So
thank you, Senator. Senator Farron.
Yeah. I just, after looking at the analysis and going back and forth, I think I'd just like to throw a comment out for the committee to think, I was going down the road this morning thinking that it may be better to commit to one bill or one vehicle. But as I looked at the first 2 bills and Representative Bailey's bill, they're really a broad range in between, from even from the penalty phase and everything else. So I just kind of maybe asked the committee that we might end up with 2 bills. One that's a little more far-reaching and one that's not as far-reaching, or I don't even know if that's the right word or not. But I'm just keeping that in the back of my mind now, especially seeing that, how we went through the whole thing, and so maybe it's better to keep all the vehicles on the table right now until we do that next round.
Thank you, Senator Farron. Representative Kinney.
Thank you. Yes, Senator Farron said what I was going to say, and I do agree with Representative McCrate that Representative Reisman had said that he kind of deferred and actually supported this part. I didn't agree, so because I wrote the notes down that day. He supported Representative Bailey's bill, but I agree with Senator Farren. We should leave them all open because they have some differences, and it'll be easier at the work session to work all three bills into one or two at that point, if they're all still open.
And it's also, I mean, it's the committee's purview too, if we'd like to request that the two sponsors work together to try and I think the intent is the same there for both of them. Do we want to put them together and say, you guys come up with the best product that you want for us to evaluate, and compromise on that? That might be better than two separate vehicles and, multiple processes. I think they're both trying to accomplish very similar outcomes. So that's another option as well. Representative Corey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I mean, I'd probably caution, the bill sponsors, at least sort of like in my experience, is that, when we're looking at something, especially something that, has to garner 2/3, and I know one of those bills doesn't have to garner 2/3, another one has to garner 2/3, that, the more we can simplify things and the shorter that summary is for, people to grab on and understand that, the more successful I think I tend to see those bills go. You have, an 8 or 9, page bill with a 2/3, do you know what I mean, threshold. And that's a lot harder to get over the finish line than it is a simple, bill. So that's my thought.
Thank you, Representative Corey. Senator Lucchini.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, just to that point, yeah. I think we just have to work through the issues. That's it. We just have to go through each and every issue as a committee and then figure out if there's things we can agree on. So, and I'm fine with keeping them all alive and tabling them all eventually. So.
Okay. Thank you, Senator. Senator Hickman.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Because I missed the public hearing on this and haven't yet read all of the testimony, was there a reason given by the bill sponsors about emergency versus non-emergency legislation?
I don't recall that, but I don't know, maybe Janet, did you recall anything like that in the testimony?
I think, Mr. Chair, I think probably a lot of it has to do with the ongoing current referendum for the corridor.
Yeah, timing of when it was submitted, when the legislation was submitted. Yeah. Does that help, Senator Hickman?
Yes. It sounds as if, based on what Senator Lucchini said, that perhaps the two vehicles that are the most aligned want to deal with the situation in front of us. And Representative Bailey's bill just wants to look at the bigger picture, which would need to be an emergency, therefore.
Okay. Senator Lucchini's point, there are bills now, our bills now. So we can both on separate vehicles, we can combine them, we can hammer that out any way we like. So Representative Kinney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll make a motion to table LD 194.
All right, thank you, Representative Kinney. Motion to table is non-debatable by Representative Kennedy, seconded by Senator Hickman. I don't think we need a roll call. Could we do there's a small enough group, I think we could probably just do a show of hands. So everybody in favor of tabling, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Karen, can you confirm that? 11-0 in favor. So 194 is tabled. Is there another motion? Representative Kinney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to table LD 479.
Second.
A move to table is non-debatable from Representative Kinney, 479, LD 479, seconded by Senator Hickman. Same thing again, we'll show of hands. All those in favor of tabling, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I have 11-0, Karen. Can you confirm that, please? In favor of tabling. Okay.
She's still recording the vote from the last one.
Yeah.
I believe we're missing 3, Mr. Chair. So that would be 10. Is that correct? No.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8,
No,
9,
no,
10,
no, no.
11.
We're missing only Tuttle and Harrington.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Gotcha. I'm good.
Okay.
My apologies.
So I had 11-0 for tabling LD 479 as well. So that's tabled. And last one for the day, Representative Kinney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move we table LD 641.
Second.
I didn't see who that was either Senator Hickman or Representative Corey. I don't know which. Why don't you raise your hand?
Representative Riley.
Oh, Representative Riley. Sorry. All right. I will say motion by Representative Kinney to table LD 641, seconded by Representative Riley. Again, show of hands if you are for tabling. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. All right, I have 11-0 in favor of tabling. And I think that will then conclude the work sessions. And I will defer and hand it back to Senator Lucchini. I should have probably done that earlier, but I was right in the middle of something. I wasn't sure if he was up to speed with what we were doing or catching up. So, and he probably needed a break. So, but I will hand the gavel back to the senator.
All good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I think that concludes the day's work. Is that right, Janet? Okay, so we are coming back on Monday, I think at 9. Is that right? Okay, so I'm guessing we have public hearings Monday at 9, I think. So, all right, everybody have a nice weekend, and we'll see you all on Monday. Thanks for your work. Thanks really for Janet for putting that all together. So, all right, thanks.
Yes, thanks, Janet.